Chapter 23. It was the first time Lei Xingfeng saw the old man laugh so strangely. He said, what are you laughing at? The old man couldn't suppress the joy on his face. He said, a phone. In this period of time, you stay at home and take care of little sister. I need to go out for a period of time. Lei Xingfeng was surprised. Where are you going? Ever since he came to this world, his grandfather had never left Tiger Cliff Castle. Suddenly hearing that the old man wanted to go out, he panicked, even though he was about to reach the level of 1,000 Luan Master. The old man was his stabilizing force. He couldn't do without him. The old man said, don't worry, I'll be back soon. A phone. Before I come back, don't leave Tiger Cliff Castle. The terrain here is steep, easy to defend, and hard to attack. It's relatively safer. Lei Xingfeng said, but, we just started to stockpile food. To survive the winter, this bit of food isn't enough. The old man said, don't worry about that. I'll bring it back. Lei Xingfeng calculated. The bull he hunted, he had quite a bit of meat. It was all marinated and dried under the eaves. There were also 2 complete bull skins and horns that could be exchanged for a lot of things. In addition, with the old man's departure, there would be less people to eat. With this calculation, they could barely survive the winter. He said, okay, if you can come back soon, I can go out to hunt again. The old man said, I'll be back soon. A phone. Take care of your little sister. Don't worry about anything else. Lei Xianyao said, my brother and I will be good at home and wait. Lei Xingfeng climbed up. He only felt his whole body aching. He bitterly laughed. The aftereffects are not light. Damn, my whole body hurts. The old man said, you just need to practice once. There's too much Lei Li in your body. You need to convert it into Lei Lun Li. Lei Xingfeng nodded. Okay, Yao go to Aunt Qing's house. Brother will go practice. The little girl knew that cultivation was very important. She nodded sensibly and said, okay, I'll go play with Sister Xiang. The old man tidied up and said, a phone will walk with Yi for a while. He has something to say. Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, okay, actually he has a lot of questions to ask. Arriving at the training area on the cliff, the grandfather and grandson both sat down. The old man said, you cultivate first, dissolve the lightning energy in your body. This time you should be able to break through the 1,000 Luan level and reach the level of 1,000 Luan Master. Lei Xingfeng activated the violent thunder art. In an instant, countless arcs of electricity appeared on his body. The old man took a few steps back and carefully observed Lei Xingfeng's cultivation. No one knew what he was thinking, but the smile on his face grew wider and wider. Lei Xingfeng's cultivation this time was completely different. His Lei Lun Li once again began to increase rapidly. In less than an hour, his Lei Lun Li had already broken through the 1,000 Luan level and reached the 1,800 Lei Lun Li. Then it began to slow down. The old man waited for Lei Xingfeng to open his eyes and retract the silver glow on his body. Then he said, how is it? Lei Xingfeng happily said, it's over. The 1,000 Luan level is over. The old man nodded and smiled. As I expected, the next step is to refine your Lei Lun Li. The Lei Lun Li will form a lightning ring. He began to explain without stopping. Lei Xingfeng listened carefully and asked questions from time to time. The old man patiently answered. The lightning ring formed by the Lei Lun Li was the manifestation of the Lei Lun Li. When one reaches the level of 1,000 Luan Master, the lightning ring formed by the Lei Lun Li can protect the body. The old man continued. Also is the compression of the Lei Lun Li. Every Lei Lun Li needs to be compressed. This does not require time to train. As long as you have time, you can do it. One Lei Lun Li will form a lightning ring. You have to remember the trick of this compression. This is my exclusive training method. Be careful not to spread it. Lei Xingfeng nodded. Okay. The old man did his best to teach. Lei Xingfeng tried his best to remember. This kind of teaching cannot be recorded. It must be remembered in one's mind. Especially this kind of exclusive teaching, it must not be spread. This is the Lei family's unique training method. Lei Xingfeng tried to refine a Lei Lunli. Sure enough, after a few minutes, he successfully refined a loose Lei Lunli into a ring. If the original Lei Lunli was a loose ball of steel wire, then after refining, this Lei Lunli was twisted into a steel cable. Just the change in shape increased the level of strength. This type of training can be done at any time, so Lei Xingfeng did not continue. The old man said, "This is only the basic method. There will be more methods to improve it. Lei Lunli needs to be refined in various ways until it forms Luan Yinli. Of course, it is still too early to talk about Luan Yinli. And what you should focus on now is to refine your Lei Lunli this year. Try to increase your Lei Lunli as quickly as possible. This is the foundation stage. The quality of your foundation determines the height you can reach in the future. Don't be careless." The two talked for a while. The old man said, "Okay, that's it for today. And from now on, you have to come here to train every day." "I'm going." Lei Xingfeng accompanied the old man to the entrance of the cliff. The old man sat on the hanging basket and went down to the bottom of the cliff. Lei Xingfeng then left the cliff to go home. Thunderstorm walked out of the hanging basket and waved his hand. The hanging basket slowly rose. He let out a long breath. He had been trapped in this small place for almost 40 years. He always thought that he would die in this small place. He never thought that there would be a day when he could walk out of this small place. Don't look at his old appearance. If a few hunters came, they would not be able to defeat him. Back in the day, he was a very famous master. If it were not for his injuries, he would not have come to this small place to raise his children and pass down his bloodline. Soon, Thunderstorm disappeared into the forest. Thunderstorm's goal was clear. He needed to find a thunderstorm. He needed lightning to stimulate himself. Following his instinct, he went straight to the north. Relying on his instincts towards lightning, Thunderstorm shuttled through the forest. 2 days later, Thunderstorm found a suitable place. Looking at the rolling dark clouds in the sky, the old man cracked a smile. Without hesitation, he found a huge ancient tree and climbed up like an ape. This guy had a deep understanding of lightning. After climbing to the top of the tree, he began to chop the tree with his axe. After a few minutes, the tree's top was broken. Thunderstorm brought 2 weapons, an axe and a steel spear. He stabbed the spear into the broken part of the tree and looked up at the sky. Only then did he sit down on the broken part of the tree. Using a rope, he tied himself to the branch and waited for the storm to come. Kacha! Rumble! A bolt of lightning flashed in the distance, followed by a clap of thunder. Even Lei Bao was shaken to his core. He cursed in his heart. He could only give it a try. If he succeeded, then everything would be fine. If he failed, then he would not be able to survive. This ancient tree was extremely tall. Although the top of the tree had been chopped off by the thunderstorm, it was still much taller than the other trees. It was like a flagpole standing in the middle of the forest, coupled with a steel spear. This thing was definitely a sharp weapon that could attract lightning. Boom! An ancient tree in the distance was set ablaze by the lightning. The old man was slightly uneasy. He muttered to himself, "Damn it, please don't make the first bolt of lightning smaller. It's too big. I don't know if I can take it. Damn it, amazing!" Bean-sized raindrops fell. In a few breaths, Thunderstorm was completely drenched. The old man held the steel spear with both hands and looked at the sky. The rain was getting heavier and heavier. Continuous thunder rumbled and lightning flashed across the sky. Finally, a bolt of lightning struck the steel spear. Boom! In an instant, the old man became a glowing object. Countless bolts of lightning flowed in. The old man could not see anything. Even if he closed his eyes, he could feel the silver-white light piercing his eyes. At this moment, he began to use the unfamiliar thunderstorm technique. This was a technique he created by combining many of his techniques. At this moment, the old man knew that he had made the right bet. He had once again mastered the mystery of lightning. The ley Lunley that had been withered for decades began to surge. It was like a dried-up river in the desert that was suddenly injected with large amounts of water. This kind of increase was different from Xian Feng's. A single lightning bolt had instantly raised the old man to the level of a Milun master without any waste. The old man stood up abruptly. The ropes binding him instantly breaking, he roared towards the sky, his hand holding the steel spear as he roared. Come, come, the more the better. Ha 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 ha. Boom, boom. Under the continuous lightning strikes, the steel spear was actually struck by the lightning until it was broken into pieces. The old man did not care, as he held the steel spear tightly and absorbed the lightning crazily. His training began to rise. Lei Lunley gradually turned into Luan Inli, which was Lei Luanin, after an entire day. When the clouds dispersed, the old man shook his head unwillingly. With a few more bolts of lightning, he could recover 40% of his strength. With 60% of his strength, he would be able to possess Inli. That would be the so-called Lei-In. At that time, he would truly be a top expert in the world. In just a moment, the old man smiled. To be able to recover this much strength, he was already satisfied. He thought to himself, with a few more bolts, I should be able to recover 60% of my strength. It should be enough to bring a Feng and Yao Yao out of this place. He pulled out the steel spear. Only then did he realize that the steel spear that was as thick as a chicken egg was actually thinner. The steel spear was still useful. He held the steel spear and flew up, chasing after the clouds. When Lei Xingfeng returned home, he saw the chieftain Sangyu and a few hunting team leaders. Ku Dashan was also among them. He asked curiously, Chieftain, Uncle Ko, why are you all here? Sangyu said, This time, we came to discuss something. Lei Xingfeng said, The room is too small. Let's all stay in the yard. He moved a few large stones and said, Everyone sit. Chieftain, if there's anything you need, please instruct us. Sangyu laughed bitterly and said, This time, Tiger Cliff Castle suffered heavy losses. If it wasn't for you, a Feng, chasing away the people from Lead Eagle's Tiger Cliff Castle would be finished. On behalf of the hunters of Tiger Cliff Castle, I thank you. Lei Xingfeng said, You're welcome. I am also a member of Tiger Cliff Castle. This is what I should do. He knew that the chieftain did not come to his house just to thank him. Chapter 24. Sangyu hesitated for a moment before saying, Feng. Ha, it's almost winter. Our Tiger Cliff Castle's food reserves are far from enough. You are now the main hunter, so everyone wants to hear your opinion on what to do. As a master hunter, his position in Tiger Cliff Castle was completely different. Not only did he have to hunt for himself, but he also had to participate in the planning of the entire Tiger Cliff Castle's hunt. Xian Feng was silent for a moment. He wasn't really 16 years old. Adding in his previous life, his age wasn't any younger than the people here. So this bit of responsibility was something he acknowledged. It was just that when his grandfather left, he repeatedly told him not to go out. After a while, Lei Xingfeng said, Clan leader, uncles, Yi will go out. During this time, I must stay in Tiger Cliff Castle. And wait for me, Yi, to come back. We will organize another large-scale hunt. I will be in charge of hunting the bulls. Don't worry, once I go out, I will be in charge of hunting enough bulls. The rest of you only need to be responsible for transporting them. We will not lack food this winter. Also, when you go out hunting, be careful of lead eagles, people. Don't fight head on. It's best if you can quickly retreat. Everyone nodded. In the past battles with lead eagles hunters, although there were casualties on both sides, it was never this cruel. In one battle, there were dozens of casualties on both sides. As for hunting bulls, no one had any objections. As long as they went once, with Lei Xingfeng's strength as 1,000 Luan master, killing bulls would be too easy. At that time, they could harvest a large amount of bull meat and survive the winter would not be a problem. The clan leader had seen Lei Xingfeng's strength. Regarding Lei Xingfeng's promise, he was overjoyed and said, "That's good, that's good." He discussed with the others for a while. This period of time could not be wasted. The hunters of Tiger Cliff Castle were still going out to hunt, but they were not allowed to stay outside for too long. When they heard the signal, they could come back at any time. Once Lei Xingfeng had time, everyone could go out together at any time. After chatting for a while, Song Yu brought the others and left. Lei Xingfeng returned to the wooden hut and sat there in a daze. He was thinking about what his grandfather had said and comparing it to what he had experienced during his cultivation. He was no longer as ignorant as he was in the beginning. He had his own views on Lunley, especially Lei Lunley. In his eyes, it was just a way to use energy. However, in this world, there were different ways to use this energy. He might be unfamiliar with other types of energy, but he was quite familiar with electricity. He could even use some of his experiences from his previous life. If it were other types of Lunley, he would have a headache. For example, dark Lunley or golden Lunley. Those would make him scratch his head. However, he was very familiar with electricity. In his previous life, he had studied electrical engineering and was also an electrical engineer. Therefore, he had many ideas in his head. It was just that he had no way to combine them with the Lei Lunley of this life. After all, he had been cultivating for too long, and many of the characteristics of Lei Lunley were still unclear. When Lei Lunley was first produced, it was in a very loose arc. He could not see it, but he could clearly feel it. After refining it once, Lei Lunley would form a lightning ring, and it would quickly condense. At this time, Lei Xingfeng realized that the hidden Luan space in his body had expanded a lot. The space that was originally the size of a fist had become a sphere with a diameter of 2 feet. Actually, when he reached 100 luns, the hidden Luan space in his body was already the size of a soccer ball. However, his training speed was too fast. Before he could check it out, he had already reached 1,000 luns. Therefore, when Lei Xingfeng realized that his hidden Luan space had expanded, he was very happy. A sphere with a diameter of 2 feet could store many things. It was comparable to a normal bag in his previous life. It was like he was carrying a bag with him everywhere he went. Moreover, he could ignore the weight. An invisible bag that others could not see. This was too convenient. Lei Xingfeng did not know that his hidden Luan space was very special. A normal 1,000 Luan master's hidden Luan space was at most 1 foot and a few inches. Most 1,000 Luan masters' hidden Luan space was not even 1 foot in diameter. His hidden Luan space was large because of the characteristics of Lei Lunley and the benefits of being struck by lightning. However, even if his hidden Luan space had expanded, Lei Xingfeng did not have anything to store. He could not store meat or food. As thunderstorm chased after the clouds and lightning, his strength increased rapidly. He also realized that his hidden Luan space had expanded again. This was much more powerful than Lei Xingfeng's. A sphere with a diameter of about 20 meters. The things that he left in his hidden Luan space were also revealed. He was secretly glad that his hidden Luan space did not collapse. There was still a tiny dot left, which was less than 1 foot in diameter. other than some Luan rings and Luanine rings. There were only 5 exploding lightning needles, because at that time, he could only barely use the exploding lightning needles. This was his last method of suicide. Everything else was sealed. If he didn't recover his strength, these things would remain in the hidden Luan space forever. And after death, the hidden Luan space would fall into the ground and become a treasure trove. Whoever got it would be rich. The things that were not eye-catching in the past, after 40 years of poverty, became extremely precious. Thunderstorm let out a long breath. Looking at the clouds, he did not want to continue chasing. It had already been 10 days. With his grandson and granddaughter to worry about, he did not want to stay in the wild. It was different from before. In the past, as long as there was a sliver of a chance to improve, he would chase after it. Let's go home. The old man Lei Bao flew towards Tiger Cliff Castle. His speed was as fast as lightning. Suddenly, he saw a huge mountain peak. Its shape was like an eagle preparing to take off. The old man Lei Bao's speed immediately slowed down. Lead eagle. The old man Lei Bao was a tyrannical expert back in the day. He had killed countless people and had enemies all over the place. With his strength, Lead Eagle was just a matter of a slap. If he wanted to destroy Lead Eagle, a slap would be enough to collapse the entire mountain. The people on top of it wouldn't be able to survive. After hesitating for a while, the old man Lei Bao did not make a move. He suddenly felt bored and thought to himself, I should let Feng do it himself. This child still lacks training. He suddenly increased his speed and flew towards Tiger Cliff Castle. During this period of time, Lei Xingfeng did not stop training. His Lei Lunli was still increasing rapidly. He had already reached 3,000 Lei Lunli. This kind of rapid growth made him very happy and gave him a great sense of achievement. He hoped that he could become a mill wheel master as soon as possible. Then he could leave Tiger Cliff Castle. On this day, Lei Xingfeng and Lei Xianyao were busy cutting the dried bull hides into pieces and arranging them neatly. Lei Xingfeng said, Little sister, calculate which families we should give the bull hides to. In Tiger Cliff Castle, the little girl Lei Xianyao's reputation was not small. This little girl's mouth was sweet. Wherever she went, she would be able to eat. During the most difficult times, even Thunderstorm and Lei Xingfeng benefited a lot. At this time, they had the ability to hunt. The two of them discussed giving the bull hides to each family. These things could be compared to hard currency, because the production and repair of hunters' leather armor could not be done without bull hides. Especially when repairing leather armor, the consumption of bull hides was quite large. Every family would store some bull hides. Giving this kind of gift, no one would be able to refuse. Just like when Auntie Qing gave a piece of bull hides, no matter if it was Yao Yao or Lei Xingfeng, they could not refuse. The 2 pieces of bull hides were very large. After processing and exposure to the sun, the bull hides were very tough. Luckily, Lei Xingfeng had great strength. It was easy to cut them. Just as the two of them were busy, the courtyard door opened and Thunderstorm walked in. He smiled and said, I'm back. Lei Xingfeng and Lei Xianyao were overjoyed. They both thought that Thunderstorm would not be back for a while. They did not expect him to be back in just 10 days. With just a glance, Lei Xingfeng felt that Thunderstorm was completely different. The wrinkles on his face were much less, and his spirit was like that of a young man, especially a faint pressure that made people feel a sense of fear. Luckily, he was his grandfather. Lei Xingfeng knew that the old man was very good to him and would not be in any danger. However, this pressure still made him feel a strong sense of threat. He said, Ayi you? Thunderstorm revealed a big smile. He squatted down and hugged Lei Xianyao, who was rushing over. He smiled and said, Yao Yao, did you miss Ayi? Lei Exine, Yao said happily. Yes, I miss him every day. Thunderstorm laughed and said, Our family's Yao Yao is the most obedient. If it was 40 or 50 years ago, anyone who knew Lei Bao would probably go crazy upon seeing this scene. At that time, the old man, Lei Bao, wasn't like this. Don't even mention smiling. He would talk to you calmly. Even if you had a big face, how could he be as gentle as he was now? Hugging Lei Exine Yao, Thunderstorm said, Are you going to use the bull skin to exchange for food? Lei Exine Yao rushed to answer. Brother said that there were many people who helped Yao Yao before, so he wanted to give them the bull skin to thank them. Thunderstorm nodded and said, That's right, they are good to our Yao Yao baby, so we should thank them. He. Lei Xingfeng said, Yi, is your injury healed? He always knew that there was a problem with Aye's body, but he never asked. He knew that it was Aye's scar, and the old man was quite arrogant, so he wisely did not say anything. Now that he saw Thunderstorm's unfathomable expression, he guessed that there was a change, so he could not help but ask. Thunderstorm nodded and said, This is all thanks to our Feng's good luck. Your good luck also brought me, He continued, I plan to give you a good thing. Lei Xingfeng immediately became excited and said, What good thing? The explosive needle that the old man gave him last time left a deep impression on him. Chapter 25. The old man took out a piece of beast skin and said, This is some tips on how to use Lei Lunli. It was recorded by me a long time ago. There is also a little surprise. The most important thing is the theory of Lunli. Here you go. Keep it in your lunchhong space. Be careful not to let outsiders get it. This kind of record was very precious. It was the foundation of a practitioner and also the foundation of a practitioner's future growth. Not all practitioners could get it. Lei Xingfeng took the beast skin. This thing was only a foot long, palm wide, hard as steel, very thin, and even had a good elasticity. It was black in color, and there was not a single word on it. Lei Xingfeng was stunned and said, this. He did not understand. The old man laughed and said, This is the skin of a star python, a natural star beast. Try to use Lei Lunli to activate it. You have to use one hand to activate it. Lei Xingfeng used one hand to activate the Lei Lunli. Suddenly on the black beast skin jumped out silver-white words, quickly flashing in front of his eyes. He could not help but say, Too fast, too fast. I can't see clearly. The old man said, Slowly inject Lei Lunli. Lei Xingfeng carefully inputted Lei Lunli. The strange beast skin suddenly emitted a layer of silver light. In an instant, a line of words appeared. And these words were like a computer screen in his previous life, gradually moving, but these words were vertical. And the words were not very clear, but through the Lei Lunli, it clearly flowed into his mind. He could not help but exclaim, So magical. It can actually be like this. The old man laughed and said, This is a beast skin made from the skin of a star python, also called the star python record. Not only can practitioners of the lightning attribute use it, other attributes can also use it, but this thing is very precious. This star python record can still write a lot after you finish reading. If there is anything you want to record, this star python record will be enough for you to use. Lei Xingfeng said, How do I use it? The old man explained how to use it. It was very simple, the input of thoughts, and Lei Lunli did not need to be written. It could be directly displayed on the star python record, much more convenient than the computers in his previous life. Lei Xingfeng could not help but exclaim, This thing is really high quality, very convenient. The old man said, It's more than just convenient. The star python record won't rot even after 10,000 years. It's almost impossible to damage the star python's skin with brute force. The star python record is the best recording tool. Many ancient cultivators used the star python record to record their cultivation experiences. Some cultivators without any inheritance would also record their own cultivation techniques. So, when you see something like this, don't worry about whether you can use it or not. Xianfeng nodded. Star pythons. Where can I hunt them? He Xingfeng to be hunted to be a star python was to be hunted. Lei Xingfeng said, This skin is too attractive. The old man laughed and said, Ha! A phone. You don't have to think about it for now. The star python is not something that people of your level can touch. And actually, you can't touch it now. Let me think. If you can become a mill wheel master with 10,000 mill wheel masters working together, maybe you can threaten the cub of the star python. But if you want to seriously injure it, at least half of the mill wheel masters will die if you want to kill it. There is almost no hope. Lei Xingfeng was shocked and said, so powerful. The old man nodded and said, Of course it is powerful. The skin of the star python not only can be used to make the star python record, it can also be used to make the star python drum to test attack power. Any attack that lands on it will leave a mark on the strength of the attack. It can clearly test the actual attack power. Lei Xingfeng said, There is such a good thing. Yi, do you have a star python drum? The old man laughed and said, Why would I want that thing? That is used by large organizations and sects to test their middle and low-level disciples. The truly powerful experts don't use this method to test. Lei Xingfeng said curiously, Oh, there is another way to test. The old man said, Of course, but to be able to reach the high level, very few people are willing to expose their strength in front of others. So in reality, once you reach the high level, it is enough as long as you know it in your heart. There is not much meaning in testing. Lei Xingfeng continued to be curious. Yi, you reached the high level? The old man raised his hand and flicked his forehead, jokingly scolding, A phone, you can't even reach the low level. What high level are you thinking about? Lei Xingfeng was stunned. He touched his forehead and said, I am already 1,000 Luan master. How can I not even be considered a low-level disciple? The old man said, One Luan Shi is considered a low-level disciple. Mill wheel master is considered a beginner. You count yourself. How can you be considered a low-level disciple? There are very few people training in this place, so 100 Luan master or 1,000 Luan master is already very impressive. Wait until you leave here. You will find that your level is too low. This is also the reason why I want you to reach mill wheel master before leaving. Lei Xingfeng sighed in his heart and said, So it is that bad? The old man shook his head and said, You are not bad at all. You are only 16 years old and have already reached the level of 1,000 Luan master. Outside, even if you are a genius, if you can reach the level of 100 Luan master in half a year, it is already very impressive. Lei Xingfeng stared with his eyes wide open, showing a look of disbelief. The old man said, That's right, you did not hear wrong. To reach the level of 100 Luan master in half a year, you are definitely a genius that all organizations and sects will fight over. If you reach the level of 1,000 Luan master at 18 years old, Wan Luan Shi at 22 years old, Mill Wheel master at 25 years old, those are all heaven's favored children. Once you reach the level of a mill wheel master, you will officially enter the ranks of low-level disciples. Those who can reach this level at 25 years old are very few. Basically, all of them are geniuses of a single attribute, other people with multiple attributes. To reach the level of 100 Luan master in 10 years is already very good. To be able to reach the level of a mill wheel master in their lifetime, that is extremely lucky. Most of the people with multiple attributes in their lifetime can only reach the level of 1,000 Luan master or Wan Luan Shi. There is basically no hope of reaching the level of a mill wheel master. Lei Xingfeng finally had some impression of this world's training system and training speed. He said, Then I am already very impressive. He pointed at his nose, feeling a little arrogant. The old man lightly knocked him and said, What are you so proud of? If you didn't have Yes Lei Yin's inspiration, If you didn't have the chance to be struck by lightning in the rainstorm, you wouldn't have such a fast training speed. Training is not just about talent. It also requires inheritance, resources, connections, and most importantly, extremely good luck. Lei Xingfeng laughed. Ah Yi, your luck is also very good. The old man sighed. He couldn't help but admit that his luck was indeed very good recently. He actually started to recover his strength and also obtained a different training method. He rubbed Lei Xingfeng's head and said, "Yes, Ah Yi, recently I have taken advantage of your light. Hee. Otherwise, I really would have died of old age in Tiger Cliff Castle. Since my luck has changed," his face suddenly changed and said, "Maybe some people are going to be unlucky." Ha! Lei Xingfeng was really curious about what level the old man had reached. He asked, Yi, what is the level above Millwill Master? Yi, what level are you at? The old man said, "You don't need to ask what level I am at. This will make you bite off more than you can chew. This is not good. As for the level above Millwill Master, I can tell you, being a Millwill Master is a bottleneck. But the real first bottleneck is when a Millwill Master advances to the next level. That is the true power of this world. Their strength can disdain anyone below the level of a Millwill Master." Lei Xingfeng's eyes lit up and said, "What is it? What is it?" The old man said, "Enlightened Millwill Master, a true expert who can condense a true ring body. Their lifespan can reach 120 years. Yes, this 120 years is the age that can maintain the vitality of a young person. If they can advance, they can generally live up to 150 years old. In this world, they have a respectable status and prominent power. Even if they don't have a sect and are alone in the world, they are still experts that cannot be underestimated. Enlightened Millwill Master," Lei Xingfeng said, "Ah Yi, can I finally reach the level of enlightened Millwill Master?" The old man raised his hand and slapped him, scolding, "Can't you be a bit more promising? Enlightened Millwill Master is not your end. It is your true starting point." Lei Xingfeng counted with his fingers. He bitterly smiled and said, "I have to reach Wanluan Shi, Millwill Master, before I can reach enlightened Millwill Master. It seems quite difficult." The old man did not know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "It may be difficult for others, but for you, it is really not difficult." He was not worried that Lei Xingfeng did not have the ambition. It must be known that once one cultivates Lei Lunli, his personality will change greatly, no matter if he was weak or timid before. Once he cultivates Lei Lunli, he will become bold and impulsive, moving forward courageously. Of course, his previous personality will be slightly affected, but it will not affect the overall direction of his personality. Lei Xingfeng said, "Right, enlightened master, is it a title?" The old man nodded and said, "Yes, it is a title. It means that you have reached a certain level. At the same time, this title is also a respectable title. Not everyone can be called enlightened master. Only those who have condensed a true ring body can be called enlightened master." Lei Xingfeng said, "Ah Yi, you are also an enlightened master?" The old man looked at him funny and said, "What do you think?" Lei Xingfeng said, "Yes, I think so too. You must be an enlightened master." The old man said, "You don't have to think too much. Working hard to cultivate is the real thing in the beginning. Cultivating hard is right. Once you reach a certain level, you will need to go out alone. Anyone who has condensed a true ring body to reach the level of an enlightened master must have their own unique things. Otherwise, it will be hard to improve in the future because the road ahead will be harder and harder, the so-called genius. Only at the beginning will have the absolute advantage." Chapter 26. Once you reach the level of a true master, the benefits of being a genius will become smaller and smaller. You need to find your own path. Only then will you be able to see the world. This kind of experience could only be provided by the old man. This allowed Lei Xingfeng to avoid countless detours. This was something that Lei Xingfeng was very clear in his heart. He was not really 16 years old, and this was his greatest advantage. He knew the old man's painstaking efforts. This kind of experience was priceless, and he remembered it deeply in his heart. Lei Xingfeng asked, Yi, if I go out alone, then the training method. The old man said, it's what you start learning. This is my unique Lei Lunli training method. Leveling up is nothing more than a qualitative change. It's not that complicated. You only need to look at my star python records to understand. So don't worry. Lei Xingfeng could not help but look at the star python records again. Of course, he only looked at the first part and immediately found a problem. He said, Yi, what is Lunli armor? The old man said, Lunli armor is an ability of 1,000 Luan master. Any attribute can condense Lunli armor, and it can greatly increase defense and attack. And Wan Luan Shi can condense ring armor, and Mill Wheel Masters can condense me ring armor. I have a detailed introduction in the Star Python records. You can follow the records and condense it. Lei Xingfeng nodded. The old man stood up and said, we have lived in Tiger Cliff Castle for so many years. You can bring them to hunt once, and hunt the entire Tiger Cliff Castle. Food for the winter. Consider it as repaying the kindness of Tiger Cliff Castle for taking care of us. If it wasn't for their help, we would have had a harder time. Lei Xingfeng said, don't worry, when I condense Lunli armor, I will go to Grandpa Patriarch's house. The old man said, maybe we will leave this place during the winter. I didn't think that I would recover one day. Hee, if that's the case, then you don't have to continue living here. After all, this place is too remote, and it won't be good for your training. Lei Xian Yao came in and said, Yi, I also want to train. The old man smiled and said, Okay. However, Yao is still too young. You need to exercise your body first. When you are 16 years old, Grandpa will send you to a place and find a good master to teach you, okay? Xian Yao said coquettishly, No, I want Grandpa to teach me, and brother can teach me too. The old man said, Yao, there's no hurry. You can let me teach you how to train your body. You can practice boxing and archery, okay? Xian Yao said obediently, Okay. In fact, she had already started to exercise, but she had just started the most basic exercise. At the age of 6, she already had the strength of 100 kilograms, which was much stronger than other children of her age. The old man said, Go by yourself, and if you don't understand anything, just look at the Star Python record. You should be able to solve the problem by yourself. He wanted to reduce Lei Xingfeng's dependence on him. Lei Xingfeng agreed and gave Lei Xian Yao a few more instructions before walking towards the cliff. Lunli armor could only be formed by 1,000 Luan master. 100 Luan master could not do it. Because 1,000 Luan master could compress Lunli, they could form Lunli armor on their body. Lei Xingfeng remembered that when he first started training, he only had 10 Lei Lunli, which was then distributed to his body and limbs. Now, he had already trained close to 4,000 Lei Lunli. The process of compressing Lunli and arranging them to form Lunli armor was actually very fast. As long as you had a plan in mind, you could form Lunli armor very quickly. In the Star Python records, there were 3 types of Lunli armors, each with their own specialties. One type had extremely strong defensive power, but weak offensive power. Another type had extremely strong offensive power, but weak defensive power. The last type had about the same defensive power and offensive power, and was more balanced. Balanced meant that none of them were outstanding. Lei Xingfeng thought for a moment. He already had his own idea. Defense was not what he was after. What he was after was the strongest attack. This was related to the lightning attribute. Moreover, after he started training Lei Lunli, he liked to attack more than defend. If it was his previous life, he would have built a tortoise shell. But after training Lei Lunli, he did not even care about it. Thinking about the battle with Da Fei, that kind of blood-boiling feeling, he decided that attacking was the best defense. The head and body had less Lunli, while the arms and legs had more Lunli. Once all the Lunli had been arranged, the next step was to form the armor. Lei Xingfeng felt that Lei Lunli was very magical. This was something that he could not imagine in his previous life. One by one, the Lei Lunli began to form after compressing. This process did not require him to work hard, but the idea in his mind caused the Lei Lunli to automatically form. What was very magical was that if he did not have this idea, then the Lei Lunli would be in its initial state, according to the Star Python record. Before forming the Lunli armor, you could do whatever you wanted. But once the Lunli armor was formed, unless you reached Wan Luan Shi, it could not be changed. In other words, once the Lunli armor was formed, then you had to reach Wan Luan Shi to start again. After the Lunli armor was formed, with the increase in Lunli, it could only strengthen the Lunli armor, but it could not form a new Lunli armor. So, the first choice was the most important. Once you chose the nature of the Lunli armor, it would accompany you for the rest of your life as 1,000 Luan Master, until you reached Wan Luan Shi. At that time, you could form the ring armor, but that was another choice. Lei Xingfeng chose the Lunli armor that he liked. He did not think of any special style, but directly chose one from the Star Python record. He was very careful. This was a habit from his previous life. Before he was familiar with Lei Lunli, he would not try to do anything new. That would be too stupid. He was still in the learning stage. Lei Xingfeng believed that once he was familiar with the characteristics of Lei Lunli, he would be able to create his own unique training method. In his previous life, he was much more familiar with electricity than the people in this world. However, this world had its own unique characteristics that he needed to learn and master. Once the two were combined, he believed that he would be different from the rest. Little by little, the Lunli armor formed. Pieces of Lei Lunli linked together, forming pieces of dazzling light. The green and white Lunli armor pieces gradually linked together. At first, it was just a small piece, but after linking together, it became a large piece, and the large piece continued to link together. Lei Xingfeng watched as the Lunli armor formed on his arm, followed by the vest on his chest, then his legs and feet, and finally his head. Finally, Lei Xingfeng's entire body flashed with dazzling light. He knew that at the beginning there would be a dazzling light, but once he successfully formed the Lunli armor, the light would not appear again. Moreover, once the Lunli armor was activated, it would stick to the skin and not appear outside of the clothes. The light gradually dimmed. Lei Xingfeng was secretly happy. Success. Once the Lunli armor formed, it would accompany him until he reached Wan Luan Shi. At that time, he would be able to form the ring armor. After thinking for a while, Lei Xingfeng considered making his own Luan equipment. Normal weapons would not be able to withstand the use of 1,000 Luan Master. Other than the black bow, which he was more comfortable with, the other steel weapons were much worse. It would be better to go back and ask his grandfather. Baijia village, located in the south of Tiger Cliff Castle, was a market and an important transportation route. It was within the sphere of influence of Hongtong in the south. In Baijia village, there was a mill wheel master overseeing it. In this area, it was like an overlord. The surrounding human settlements were all led by Baijia village. Especially when the barbarians attacked human settlements, Baijia village had the authority to recruit hunters to join in the rescue. There were 3 residential settlements here. One was Tiger Cliff Castle, one was Lead Eagles, and the last one was Baijia village. The strength of Baijia village was not something that Lead Eagles and Tiger Cliff Castle could compare to. This was because Baijia village was within Hongtong's sphere of influence and was a place overseen by a mill wheel master. Baijia village was also the only place where caravans passed by. This place was located at the intersection of land and water. An old man with a gloomy face looked at the two people in front of him. "Ing Xiao, what happened to you? You look like neither a human nor a ghost. Your face, who hit you?" Ing Xiao cried out. The old man rudely said, "What the F***ck are you talking about? Shut up. You tell me." Da Fei was about to cry. He said, "Sir, my uncle was hit by someone from Tiger Cliff Castle." This person was Ing Xiao's master, a mill wheel master from Hongtong. Ing Xiao was originally from Lead Eagles and was sent to Hongtong to study. Due to his average talent, he was taken under this old man's wing. This time, he followed the old man to Baijia village and took the opportunity to return to Lead Eagles. "Die." "Hiss." "Die." Ing Xiao's words angered the old man so much that he kicked him and scolded, "Die your F***king head." Immediately, Ing Xiao was lying on the ground like a dead dog. This kick was not heavy. Ing Xiao just did not have the face to get up. "You tell me." Da Fei told the story in detail. He did not dare to lie. However, he did not dare to say anything about Lei Xingfeng. The old man said, "In other words, it was you who went to cause trouble." Da Fei hurriedly explained, "Sir, Lead Eagles and Tiger Cliff Castle have been enemies for generations. There is no such thing as who caused trouble. When we meet, we fight to the death." The old man said with a gloomy face, "Tiger Cliff Castle. Who is backing them?" Da Fei was stunned and said, "Tiger Cliff Castle does not have any backing. They are just a group of hunters." The old man said, "Bullshit! A group of hunters can hurt Ing Xiao?" Da Fei said helplessly, "Uncle was hurt by a young man. He is of the lightning attribute, and it is a single attribute." The old man suddenly stood up. His face showed a shocked expression and said, "What? A single lightning attribute?" Chapter 27. Single lightning attribute, Luan Mark. The old man's heart was in turmoil. People with a single Luan attribute were very rare. Not to mention 1 in 10,000, but 1 in 1,000, it was hard to find one. Not only that, there were also differences in Luan marks. The rarer it was, the more valuable it was. Lei Xingfeng had a lightning Luan, an extremely rare lightning Luan mark. Where is he? At this moment, the old man was really tempted. If this matter was handled well, maybe he could be transferred back to Hongtong. Ing Yu whined, but the old man impatiently interrupted him. "You shut up, you tell me." Da Fei hurriedly said, Yes, he lives in Tiger Cliff Castle." The old man said, "What's his name? Are you sure he's only 16 or 17? That's right, with his current level. And to be able to injuring you, he shouldn't be too bad. He should be 1,000 Luan master." Towards people with a single Luan imprint attribute, he had a rough idea. Da Fei thought for a moment and said, I think he's called something Feng, right? Lei Xingfeng." Strange. His surname is Lei." The old man said, "What do you mean?" Da Fei explained, "The people in Tiger Cliff Castle are mainly surnamed Hu and Ku. Lei Xingfeng should be an outsider." He then continued, "He definitely can't be more than 18 years old. There's also something I find strange. In the beginning, he could only fight with me, and we were evenly matched." The old man said, "Nonsense. You're only 100 Luan master, and you can beat 10 of you. How could he lose to Lei Xingfeng?" Da Fei said, "When he was fighting with Uncle injured him in one move. However, during the battle, it was raining heavily. Lei Xingfeng was struck by lightning. Then He strangely persevered, as if his strength had exploded. The old man said, even if his strength exploded, he couldn't have mastered it immediately. Dafei said, Uncle didn't lose. He was attacked by Lei Xingfeng, using a one-time Luan weapon to injure him. The old man was shocked. A one-time use Luan Qi? Dafei nodded. That's right. It's a one-time use Luan weapon. It's very powerful. When it's activated, it can destroy everything around it. Luckily, that kid wasn't familiar with it, or else Uncle and he would have perished together. This was also the reason why, when he saw the Luan weapon explode, he immediately brought in you to escape. He did not dare to be careless. If it were to happen again, he would not be able to take it. The old man frowned, thought for a moment, and said, Lei Xingfeng, there should be someone behind him. Oh, to be able to refine a one-time use Luan Qi, its power is not small. No, I need to find someone to help. At this moment, the old man finally understood that this should be some expert's disciple. One-time Luan weapons were not something that anyone could refine. It was even harder to refine than Luan weapons. One-time Luan weapons were rarely used by people with a single Luan imprint. Instead, it was people with mixed Luan Qi who liked to use them. This was because as long as they could cultivate Lunli, they could activate many types of one-time Luan weapons. However, a youth with a single lightning attribute, Luan imprint, was too attractive to the old man. Dafei was full of hope. Master, we will destroy Tiger Cliff Castle. We will take revenge for my uncle. Yu's eyes were filled with hatred. Hearing this, he kept nodding. The old man said indifferently, destroy what? If that Lei Xingfeng agrees to join Hong Tong. Tiger Cliff Castle can even apply for an expert from Hong Tong to take charge. Yu and Dafei stared with their eyes wide open, full of disbelief. That kind of extreme disappointment could not be concealed. The old man said, the two of you will stay here. You are not allowed to go anywhere, especially not to Tiger Cliff Castle. Do you remember? Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Yu grunted a few times, saliva dripping from both sides of his mouth. He was angry, but he knew that he could not go against his master's temper. He was very clear that if he angered his master, he would not have a good ending. The old man said, don't be flustered and exasperated. If you can make him join Hong Tong, your contribution will not be small. As for your wound, I will find someone to heal it. Dafei did not give up and said, Master, if Lei Xingfeng does not agree to join Hong Tong. The old man sneered, impossible. I will find an expert. He knew in his heart that if Lei Xingfeng did not agree to join, Hong Tong would definitely destroy this youth. A single lightning attribute, Luan attribute. If Hong Tong could not use him, then once he matured, he would be a threat to Hong Tong. This already gave Hong Tong enough reason to kill him. Lei Xingfeng continued to train and familiarize himself with his Lunli armor for a few days. In addition, he also obtained a piece of material for making Luan weapons. It was given to him by his grandfather, but he could not find the material to make Luan weapons. It was a piece of metal that weighed more than 10 kilograms. It was a metal that he did not recognize. It was neither steel, nor gold, nor copper. Its color was very strange, black mixed with silver, the length of an arm, the thickness of an egg. The name was also strange, Lei Shijin. According to the old man, Thunderstorm, this thing was not formed naturally, but was a mixture of 10 different materials. It could store Lei Lunli and could also be used to change its shape. With Lei Xingfeng's level and methods, he definitely could not handle such a large piece of Lei Shijin. He played with the Lei Shijin. This thing's properties were very strange. It could be cut with Lei Lunli, and under the kneading of Lei Lunli, it could be as soft as mud. It could take any shape you want. But once it took shape, it needed a large amount of Lei Lunli to fix it, and required Lei Lunli to form some kind of circuit. After pondering for a few days, Lei Xingfeng finally understood some of the basics. At the same time, he also understood that he did not have the ability to handle such a large piece of Lei Shijin. He cut a small piece of Lei Shijin, which was only the size of a thumb. After a day of refining, Lei Xingfeng barely managed to make a ring. This was because it was the easiest to make. Through this ring, he could release up to 5 meters of electricity. He now understood that Lei Lunli was not just electricity as he understood in his previous life. Lei Lunli was very different from the electricity in his previous life. It was a type of energy that contained a large amount of electricity. He tried his best to understand it. His understanding of Lei Lunli from his previous life was a big obstacle to his understanding of this life's Lei Lunli. He needed to relearn it. Fortunately, he had the Star Python record. He began to understand Lei Lunli little by little. After making a ring, Lei Xingfeng went to find Sangyu to organize a new hunt. This time, Sangyu organized more people. Almost all the hunters participated. In addition, there were more than 100 young and strong women. In total, there were nearly 400 people. They left Tiger Cliff Castle. This time, they did not go to the pond. Instead, they went to the place where the bulls gathered. It was only half a day's journey from Tiger Cliff Castle, so they did not dare to go too far. The bulls' gathering place was about half a day's journey from Tiger Cliff Castle. It was a 10-square-kilometer grassland. All the trees here had disappeared. The bulls' specialty was that once they were startled, they would run amok. The trees were almost destroyed in this way. In the end, it became a flat grassland. In this place, even large beasts would not dare to casually kill bulls. In this small 10-square-kilometer piece of land, there were thousands of bulls gathered. Any beast would only dare to hunt at the edge. They would definitely not dare to enter this grassland. Once the bulls were startled, the charge of thousands of bulls was enough to trample any beast into mud. Even the barbarians would not dare to enter. At most, they would only hunt at the edge of the grassland, under the cover of the forest. This time, Lei Xingfeng decided to hunt here. Of course, he did not dare to hunt in the center of the grassland. He also planned to hunt at the edge. There were more opportunities here than at the pond. The people of Tiger Cliff Castle stayed in the forest. They found a place with dense trees. Only in this kind of place could they prevent a large herd of bulls from attacking. Lei Xingfeng led a dozen hunters to the edge of the grassland. Ku Dashan and the others also followed. As the main hunter, Lei Xingfeng had the authority to command all the hunters. He said, "We need to find a few big trees. Yes, big trees that the bulls can't break." A hunter said, "I know where there are big trees." Soon, the group arrived in front of a few big trees. They were so big that 4 or 5 people couldn't hug them. Lei Xingfeng thought for a moment and said, "I still need some people. Uncle Ku, go call some people." Ku Dashan said, "Okay, how many people do you need?" Lei Xingfeng calculated and said, "I need 100 people." Ku Dashan was stunned and said, "That many people? Okay, we'll listen to you. I'll go call some people." He turned and walked into the forest. After a while, 100 hunters came over. Sangyu also followed. This hunt was too important. He couldn't just wait at Tiger Cliff Castle. This team also needed him to coordinate. After all, Lei Xingfeng was too young. He was afraid that some of the hunters would not know the severity of the situation and offend the little guy. Sangyu said, "A phone will listen to your command." Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "I need you to dig a hole." Everyone was stunned. One of the hunters couldn't help but say, "You want to dig a trap? We've already tried this trap. It's useless." Lei Xingfeng shook his head and said, I don't want to dig a trap. I want to dig. He reached out and asked Kudashin for a short spear. He quickly dug a hole with a diameter of 1 foot and about 2 feet deep. He said, dig a hole like this. The group didn't understand. Sangyu shouted, listen to a phone. He's the main hunter. He can do whatever he wants. Lei Xingfeng didn't explain and said, follow this distance and dig a hole every once in a while. According to the hole he dug, there was a hole every 1 meter in the shape of a plum blossom. The group didn't continue talking and started digging according to Lei Xingfeng's arrangement. This kind of hole was too easy for hunters. In less than an hour, the ground was covered with hundreds of holes. Lei Xingfeng said, cover the surface with leaves and branches. Horse trap. This was a method Xianfeng knew of in his past life to deal with a galloping horse. He believed that it would work on the bulls of this world. Although the bulls were thicker and had bigger hooves, their weakness should be the same. With such a large body, no matter how sturdy the calves of the bulls were, they wouldn't be able to withstand such a lame method. Chapter 28. Sangyu said, Afeng, we're done digging. What else do you need us to do? Lei Xingfeng said, no need. This is good. You guys go back first. Leave the people who came first and go up the trees. Sangyu gave a few orders, and the group of hunters retreated. Sangyu did not leave. He said, I'll go up the trees too. The old man was still worried. Hiding in the trees was not dangerous. Lei Xingfeng nodded. Okay, everyone go up the trees. Once the herd comes, remember to hug the trees tightly. If you fall, it'll be fun. Kudashin said, Afeng, what are you going to do? He also did not understand what Lei Xingfeng wanted to do. It was no wonder. The hunters of Tiger Cliff Castle could only go as far as Baijia village. Whether it was experience or knowledge, they were extremely lacking. Their skills were passed down by their elders, and they had to figure it out themselves. How could they compare to Lei Xingfeng's knowledge from his previous life? Lei Xingfeng laughed. Everyone, don't go down the trees. Ha! Let's see what's going on. He took the black bow from his back and pulled the bowstring. This time, he brought 30 special arrows, which was enough for him to use. Kudashin hesitated for a moment. He turned and climbed up a tree. Afeng, be careful. Lei Xingfeng waved his black bow and snuck towards the grassland. Everyone was shocked. No one dared to enter the grassland. However, they quickly relaxed because they could clearly see that Lei Xingfeng did not actually enter the grassland. He was hiding in the bushes at the edge of the grassland. On the trees, everyone could clearly see the herd of bulls slowly moving. There were at least 40 to 50 bulls in each herd, and some even had a few hundred bulls. They were leisurely eating the grass, and some were eating the young leaves of the short trees at the edge. Each bull was incomparably huge. The hunters on the giant trees were all envious, and their hearts were racing. A single bull was enough for a family to pass through the winter peacefully. Who wouldn't want to get a bull? From the trees, they could clearly see the herd of cows, and Lei Xingfeng's figure moving stealthily among the shrubs. Kudashin clenched his fists and said, What does Afeng want? Kunanshan smiled bitterly. Who knows? Suddenly, a hunter whispered, Not good. Look, the position of these giant trees was relatively good, and they could see very far. A few hundred meters away, a few figures could be vaguely seen. Sangyu stared at them. After a while, he whispered, Barbarian hunters. Everyone stay hidden. Oh no, someone inform Afeng. Kusher said, I'll go. There was already a hunter who quickly climbed down the tree towards Lei Xingfeng. This hunter was small and agile. He was a famous hunter in Tiger Cliff Castle. It wasn't that he was good at hunting, but he was good at scouting. His speed was extremely fast. In a few minutes, he had already snuck to Lei Xingfeng's side. Everyone could see clearly from the trees and relaxed. Lei Xingfeng and the hunter quickly returned. At this time, they couldn't alert the herd of cows. Climbing up the giant tree, Lei Xingfeng said, "Why are there barbarians?" Song Yu was so angry that his hands were shaking. Last time, they met Lead Eagle's people. This time, they met barbarians. Their luck was really bad. It wasn't going well. He said, F***CK, this is too unlucky. Why are barbarians here? There seems to be a lot of them. A phone, look over there. The barbarians were tall and big. It was difficult to hide in the forest. Lei Xingfeng carefully observed. After a while, he said, "There are at least 10 barbarians." Everyone's face turned pale. If there were more than 10 barbarians, it would definitely be a large hunting team. With the barbarian strength, it was easy for them to beat 5 or 6 normal hunters. They were the top hunters in the forest. It was also the first time Lei Xingfeng saw a hunter. In the past, he lived in Tiger Cliff Castle and didn't have the chance to go out. Of course, he didn't see any barbarians. However, he didn't know how many stories he had heard about barbarians. They were cannibalistic, crazy, strong, and so on. Hunters had a natural fear of barbarians. Song Yu whispered, "I hope they don't find us." He suddenly remembered something and said, "Someone go back and tell our people to hide well." A hunter answered and left. What a joke! A large group of people were still hiding in the forest. If they were discovered by the barbarians, they would become prey. They had to hide well. Lei Xingfeng frowned and stared into the distance. He said, "They should be facing the bulls. Aren't they afraid of being attacked by the bulls?" Song Yu said, "Of course they are afraid. However, the barbarians are very strong and have thick skin. If we are hit by a bull, we won't survive. However, the same cannot be said for the barbarians. Their bodies are much better than ours. As long as they don't continuously hit or step on us, they have a chance to survive." Hudaniu said in a low voice, "Barbarians' recovery speed is also much better than ours. I once surrounded a barbarian with a dozen hunters. That guy was covered in blood. I don't know how many times I slashed him, but in the end, he still ran away. Barbarians are extremely hard to kill." Many hunters whispered about the barbarians' strength. Lei Xingfeng secretly shook his head. With the hunter's mentality, there was no way they could fight the barbarians. They were already scared. This was the best hunter in Tiger Cliff Castle. The rest of the hunters would be defeated if they met the barbarians. Song Yu said, "They're moving. So many of them." Lei Xingfeng's eyes were sharper than anyone else's. Before he started cultivating, his eyesight was already very good. After he cultivated Lei Lunli, he could see even further. He silently counted and quickly said, "At least 21 barbarians. As for the ones I didn't see, there should be a few more." Song Yu took a deep breath. More than 20 barbarians. Even if all the hunters of Tiger Cliff Castle came out, there would still be a lot of casualties. No matter what, they couldn't meet the barbarians. Even if they failed this time, there was still the next time. But how would they meet the barbarians? This loss was something he didn't even dare to think about. One by one, the barbarians jumped down from the trees. There were 4 barbarians at the front, a dozen at the back, and another group of barbarians popped out from the trees. Xianfeng was still counting. Another 6 came out, another 2. Good fellow, it's over 30. Other than Lei Xingfeng, almost all the hunters' faces turned white. Dashan was the same. His face was pale as he said, "Could it be that the barbarian tribe organized a group hunt?" Song Yu bitterly laughed and whispered, "Dashan, you should be right. This year's cold season was not easy, and this year's warm season was very rare. If it wasn't for this, Tiger Cliff Castle wouldn't have organized such a large-scale hunt. He didn't expect the barbarians to be the same. They rarely hunted near human settlements because if they crossed the line, they would attract the experts from Hundred Village. Very quickly, the barbarians scattered behind the trees. Only the 4 barbarians at the front continued forward. Each of them had a thick, long spear in their hands. With Lei Xingfeng's eyes, he could guess how thick the spear was. It was as thick as a small bowl and over 3 meters long. It was like a sharpened steel pillar, a very scary weapon. Other than the thick spear, there was also a huge axe. According to Lei Xingfeng's estimation, the axe was as big as half a door. Seeing the barbarians holding it so easily, Lei Xingfeng couldn't help but smack his lips. This was simply too scary. No wonder they were called barbarians, too damn scary. Even if Lei Xingfeng was already 1,000 Luan master, when he saw the barbarians, he was still a bit scared. It wasn't a matter of strength, but the barbarians' appearance was too abnormal. In front of the barbarians was a herd of bulls. There were about 70 to 80 bulls. It seemed like the barbarians had long been eyeing this herd of bulls. One of the barbarians suddenly ran a few steps forward and roared. He raised his hand and threw out a spear that was like a steel pillar. Then, without looking at the bulls, the 4 of them turned and ran. Moo! The spear fiercely pierced into the body of a huge bull. In an instant, it pierced into the bull's body. The bull swayed and fell down. Lei Xingfeng's pupils shrank. At this moment, he finally understood why the barbarians dared to hunt bulls. The bull's skin couldn't be broken by normal hunters, but the barbarian's spear easily pierced through and killed a bull in an instant. This kind of strength made Lei Xingfeng extremely shocked. He estimated that his Lunli armor wouldn't be able to block it, although he hadn't tried it before. He also didn't dare to try. The 4 barbarians ran separately. Lei Xingfeng was once again shocked. Even from so far away, he could still hear the sound of footsteps. Immediately after, a bull's roar sounded. The herd of bulls suddenly went crazy and began to charge at the 4 barbarians. The bull's hooves stomped on the ground. Even though Lei Xingfeng was far away, he could still hear it clearly. The 4 barbarians ran separately. Suddenly, the herd of bulls also split up. However, the largest herd of bulls was still chasing after the barbarian who threw the spear. Lei Xingfeng was even more surprised. He said, "These barbarians are very smart." Sang Yu said, "The barbarians are never stupid, especially when it comes to hunting. They are even smarter than us." The barbarians ran wildly. They knew better than anyone that once they were hit by a bull, their chances of survival were very small. The barbarian, who had just killed a bull, madly ran for a few hundred meters. The bulls behind him were less than 10 meters away from him. He suddenly jumped up and grabbed onto a hanging branch with his heavy body. He suddenly lifted himself up and agilely climbed up the tree. The bulls behind him didn't even have time to stop. Of course, they wouldn't stop either. They directly rammed into the barbarian. Boom, boom, boom. The barbarian bulls rammed into the trees one after another. Xianfeng could clearly see the trees shaking from afar. Even though the trees were thick, the barbarian bulls were still able to shake them. Countless tree trunks were broken. Those thick trees couldn't even block the barbarian bulls' attacks. Kacha! Following that, the trees broke and collapsed. Other than the giant trees, there were almost no other trees that could stop the bull's charge. However, the speed of the bull's charge also slowed down. With a shout, the barbarians in the trees and behind the trees immediately attacked. Chapter 29. Xianfeng saw a barbarian wielding a gigantic axe, and with a swing of the axe, blood spurted out and a gigantic bull's head was chopped off. Xianfeng couldn't help but take in a deep breath. What the fuck? This is too exaggerated. After a few minutes, only 30 to 40 bulls managed to escape. The other half were killed by the barbarians. Seeing the hunters from Tiger Cliff Castle, they all grimaced in pain. This was too ruthless. In one attack, they managed to kill 40 bulls. This kind of harvest was enough to make anyone envious. Sangyu let out a sigh of relief and said, "The barbarians have a good harvest. Then they won't care about us." There was a saying, "Don't be afraid of many barbarians, but be afraid of starving barbarians." Hungry barbarians were the most dangerous. Lei Xingfeng said, "The barbarians aren't invincible. I saw 2 barbarians injured. Oh, one of them should be seriously injured." With his sharp eyes, he found the injured barbarians. One of them couldn't dodge in time and was directly hit by a bull on a huge tree. In an instant, a big hole opened in his chest. The horns of a bull were not to be trifled with. The barbarian's hunt could be said to be extremely successful in comparison to the harvest. Nearly 40 barbarian bulls were a huge fortune. A group of hunters from Tiger Cliff Castle looked at the barbarians with envy. Ku Zizhong said, "The barbarians are really strong. TSK, TSK, they are the real hunters." The hunters discussed among themselves. There was no lack of envy in their words. Only Tsangyu said, "Okay, don't envy them. We can also hunt bulls. It's just that we can't act now. Once the barbarians leave, we can start." Lei Xingfeng sighed, "We can't hunt today. Let's go back. There are so many bulls. Just organizing and transporting them will be enough to make the barbarians busy." Tsangyu nodded. "Yes, let's go." The group of hunters didn't get anything and were scared away by the barbarians. Xianfeng didn't have a choice. He wasn't afraid of the barbarians, but the hunters around him didn't want to fight with the barbarians. If it wasn't a matter of life and death, no one would be stupid enough to challenge the barbarians. Actually, even Lei Xingfeng felt his scalp go numb after witnessing the barbarians' attacks. That kind of pure power was absolutely shocking. The people of Tiger Cliff Castle were still hiding in the giant trees. There were many giant trees here, and according to Lei Xingfeng's estimation, it would take at least a few thousand years for the trees to grow so thick and tall. A few hundred people could climb up a giant tree, and if they were careful, they would not be able to see them at all. Actually, even the giant trees weren't safe. There were many beasts that could climb trees, and there were also birds of prey in the sky. If you weren't careful, you would be ambushed. So even if you climbed up the trees, you would still need to set up a lot of traps and be on guard. The hunters of Tiger Cliff Castle quietly discussed the barbarians' gains. Lei Xingfeng found a giant tree and climbed up. He didn't stay with the hunters because he needed to train. Now, every time he trained, he could increase 40 to 50 lei lunli. His strength was also increasing bit by bit. After the baptism of lightning, he found that his training speed was very slow. He didn't feel the joy of a sudden increase, but he was still very patient. Grandpa had a sentence that Lei Xingfeng always remembered in his heart. Any kind of training required a lot of patience and perseverance, especially for the practitioners of this world, because of the age limit. If they couldn't increase their strength within a limited time, once their body aged, it would be too late. Lei Xingfeng's training speed was already very fast because he had a lei yin in his body, so he had more capital than other practitioners. Even for a single attribute practitioner, the amount of lunli they could increase in a day rarely exceeded 20, but Lei Xingfeng had already reached 40 or even 50. Just training lunli wasn't enough. Lei Xingfeng had to train his newly trained lunli until it reached his requirements. The sky gradually darkened. Lei Xingfeng had finished his training. He quickly left and climbed up the giant tree where the hunters of Tiger Cliff Castle were. He didn't want to spend the night alone on a giant tree. Sangyu saw Lei Xingfeng come back and said, Afone, you rest first. You don't need to keep watch tonight. Hee, you are our main hunter. Tomorrow, we will depend on your performance. Lei Xingfeng nodded in agreement. They had enough people, so he didn't need to keep watch. He climbed up to Ku Dashin's position and sat down. He let out a sigh of relief and said, Uncle Ku, I'm back. Ku Dashin said, hurry up and eat something. It's going to be dark soon. We found a tree hole in Nanshan. After you eat, go sleep in it. In the morning, Lei Xingfeng came out of the tree hole. He didn't sleep well last night. There were all kinds of wild beasts howling the whole night. He walked out of the tree hole and saw Ku Dashin not far away. He said, Uncle Ku, did you sleep well? Ku Dashin cursed, the whole night, I almost didn't sleep. All the F*King wild beasts went crazy, howling nonstop. Lei Xingfeng looked at Ku Dashin's dark circles and didn't know what to say. He didn't sleep well either. Ku Nanshan said, it's rare for the night to be so lively. It seems like all the wild beasts went crazy. Sangyu climbed up and said, what's so strange about that? The barbarians hunted so many bulls. They must have skinned them at night and harvested the fresh meat. It would be strange if the wild beasts didn't go crazy. The barbarians were in groups. They weren't afraid, but they were so noisy that we couldn't sleep. Lei Xingfeng suddenly understood and said, no wonder, no wonder. Once the smell of blood spread out, it would attract a large number of wild beasts. Hu-Yi quickly climbed up the tree and quickly came to Sangyu's side. He said, Chief, it's not good. Sangyu asked, what's wrong? Hu-Yi hurriedly said, the barbarians are coming here. They're very close. Sangyu's face suddenly turned white. He shouted, quick, hide. No one is allowed to make a sound. All the women hide in the tree hole. There were many holes in the giant tree. Some were big and some were small. The big ones could fit 12 people, while the small ones could fit 3 to 5 people. In just a few minutes, all the women hid in the tree holes. The rest of the hunters held their weapons and hid in the leaves. No one dared to expose themselves. If they were discovered by the barbarians, they would be in big trouble. After all, the hunters were also the targets of the barbarians. The hunters of Tiger Cliff Castle were all gathered in a giant tree. If they were discovered, they would be better prey than the bulls. This was because the barbarians liked to catch hunters alive. When they brought them back, not only could they work, but when there was a shortage of food, these hunters would become food. Sometimes the barbarians would rather give up a large prey to catch a hunter. Of course, the barbarians rarely went to human settlements to hunt. It would cause a strong backlash and even cause a large-scale retaliation. Lei Xingfeng heard the heavy footsteps and knew that the barbarians were walking with heavy weights. Although the barbarians were tall and strong, when they walked in the forest, they were silent. However, once they successfully hunted and carried the prey, they didn't care. Not only were their footsteps heavy, they would also let out a threatening roar from time to time. This was to scare off the surrounding wild beasts that were preparing to ambush them. The strength of the barbarians was indeed abnormal. Lei Xingfeng saw a barbarian dragging 2 bulls forward step by step. This group of barbarians had about 38 people. The 40 bulls weren't skinned and were completely dragged by the barbarians. However, the wounds on the bulls still had large amounts of blood flowing out. It was no wonder that so many wild beasts were following them. There were many wild beasts following the barbarians. Among them was a group of leopards. They were running in the trees, ready to pounce at any time. The worst part was that the path the barbarians took was right under the giant tree, where the hunters of Tiger Cliff Castle were. Seeing the barbarians appear under the tree, every hunter's heart began to beat wildly. Everyone clenched their weapons and prayed that the barbarians would pass smoothly and not find them. What you feared would happen. The barbarians didn't find the hunters in the giant tree, but the wild beasts that followed them, especially the leopards, found the hunters in the tree. A few of the leopards directly pounced on them. Sangyu's vision turned black. He was filled with hatred and anger. His hands and feet turned cold, and his face turned green. He knew it was over. There were more than 20 leopards. Wild beasts were also masters of bullying the weak and fearing the strong. They didn't dare to pounce on the barbarians, but when they found the hunters, they immediately became excited. They didn't care what the prey was. As long as they could catch it easily, they wouldn't let it go. Lei Xingfeng's face also didn't look good. He was the main hunter and also responsible for the safety and command of the hunting team. It was impossible for the barbarians to hide from such a big commotion. Immediately, a few of the barbarians stared at the giant tree. Soon, they discovered the hunter on top of the giant tree. There was no way to hide anymore. The hunter's figure was immediately exposed during the fight with the leopard. At this point, nothing else mattered. The most important thing was that they couldn't panic. If the hunters panicked, then they wouldn't be far from death. Lei Xingfeng shouted, "Some of you block the leopards. The rest, follow me to kill the barbarians." They had no choice but to kill. When the barbarians saw the hunters, they were like perverts seeing beauties or hungry ghosts seeing meat. They wouldn't hesitate to pounce on the hunters. Sure enough, when the barbarians saw the hunters in the giant tree, they all revealed their sharp teeth and let out a hissing sound. The sound was so loud that even the women hiding in the tree hole were scared and shivering. One of the barbarians let go of the chain that was dragging the bull and pulled out a short spear from his back. The barbarians' weapons were similar to the hunters, but the difference was that the barbarians' weapons were bigger and thicker. The barbarian shouted and threw the short spear. Chapter 30. Kacha. Sounds were heard continuously. All the thick branches that blocked the short spear were pierced through. A hunter shouted, "Dodge!" No one was stupid enough to block the short spear. Instead, they tried their best to dodge. Finally, the short spear ran out of energy. Bang! The tip of a spear could be seen through the branches of a huge tree. There was a hunter standing on the branch. His face was pale as he looked at the tip of the spear that was poking out of his pants. He was almost scared out of his wits when he saw the sweat rolling down his face. The two barbarians let out a strange cry as they climbed up the tree. Xian Feng shouted, "Block them! Kill!" His position was too high, so he shouted as he quickly descended. At the same time, he took out his black bow and prepared to attack. The hunters shot the arrows in their hands, and some even threw short spears, attacking from above. The two barbarians suddenly became porcupines. They didn't expect that there would be so many hunters on the tree. The two barbarians screamed and jumped down from the tree. The hunters looked at the two barbarians jumping around and felt a chill in their hearts. What a joke! If a person's body was full of arrows and short spears, they would have died long ago. How could they still jump around like this? Bang! The sound of metal colliding suddenly sounded. Many of the hunters present recognized that it was the sound of Lei Xingfeng's black bow. This sound was too special. A normal hunter's bow wouldn't be able to make such a sound. Bang! 2 consecutive sounds. The two barbarians that retreated from the tree immediately fell down. No matter how strong their defense was or how strong their recovery was, if an arrow pierced through their head, they wouldn't be able to survive. Lei Xingfeng killed the two barbarians in an instant. Immediately, the hunters cheered. As long as they could quickly kill the barbarians, they wouldn't have to be afraid. Fighting the barbarians, whether it was long range or short range, was a nightmare for the hunters. 4 long-range attacks, Although the barbarians didn't have bows and arrows, their pure steel spears were thrown. As long as the hunters were hit, there was no hope of survival. As for close-range attacks, it was even more hopeless. Not only did the barbarians have thick skin, but they also had incomparable strength. Lei Xingfeng didn't dare to stop. He shouted, "Prepare the arrows for me. I want the best arrows." Immediately, hunters began to help collect the best arrows that everyone had kept. Every hunter would keep a few of their best arrows, which were used to shoot large animals. Lei Xingfeng had brought along 30 fine arrows, but it was far from enough to attack the barbarians. Even if he could hit 100% of the arrows, he might not be able to kill 100% of the barbarians, not to mention that there were almost 40 barbarians below. Bang! 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 Lei Xingfeng continued to run around the giant tree. He descended in a spiral and attacked the barbarians who tried to climb up the tree. With every twang of the bowstring, a barbarian would fall. Lei Xingfeng's attacks were extremely vicious. He basically chose the top of the head and the shoulder above the heart. As long as he hit the target, the barbarians would definitely die. In just a few seconds, 7 barbarians had already fallen. On the other hand, the hunters of Tiger Cliff Castle had yet to kill a single barbarian. Although arrows rained down and short spears flew everywhere, they were still unable to deal a fatal blow to the barbarians. A barbarian with an eagle feather on his head suddenly roared. In an instant, more than 10 barbarians shouted in unison. They all waved their arms and shot out thick steel spears. Lei Xingfeng shouted and dodged crazily. Luckily, he was a 1,000 Luan master and was strong enough to barely dodge the arrows. However, the other hunters were not so lucky. In an instant, 3 hunters were pierced by the steel spears and fell from the tree. The steel spear that was thrown out was really something that would injure and kill anyone who touched it. It was extremely perverse. Lei Xingfeng gritted his teeth and continued to shoot with his black bow among the hunters of Tiger Cliff Castle. Only he could kill the barbarians. Even if the others had the advantage of location, they could only injure the barbarians and not kill them. Bang! Bang! Lei Xingfeng no longer wanted to kill the barbarians in one shot. As long as he could hit the barbarians, it would be fine. Because the barbarians had started to dodge, the continuous casualties frightened even the barbarians. In just a few minutes, at least 15 or 16 barbarians had fallen to the ground, and more than 10 of them had died. The barbarians were also humans, and they were afraid of death. When they suddenly realized that almost half of their barbarians had died, they couldn't help but be frightened. Their leader was even more furious. Lei Xingfeng continued to shoot arrows. To the barbarians, the sound of arrows being shot was the sound of death. Every time the bowstring sounded, a barbarian would fall. Even if they didn't die, they would be heavily injured. The barbarian leader shouted. He raised his huge axe and rushed towards the giant tree. Lei Xingfeng shot an arrow. The barbarian leader suddenly raised his huge axe and blocked it. It must be known that the axe head alone was the size of half a door. It was enough to block his body. Ding! Pa! The arrow actually completely exploded, shattering into countless fragments that scattered in all directions. The barbarian leader was actually forced back by an arrow. One could imagine how powerful this arrow was. However, this arrow didn't injure the barbarian leader. He continued to climb up the giant tree. A few hunters from Tiger Cliff Castle tried to stop him, but the barbarian leader directly cut down the tree branches. The hunters fell down and were immediately killed by the barbarians below the tree. Song Yu shouted, "Everyone climb up! Go up!" After losing a few hunters, including the ones who died just now, Song Yu's heart was twitching. He kept on shouting orders. Once the hunters started to fight, their fear decreased a lot. Lei Xingfeng also shouted, "Leave it to me! The rest of you climb up." He knew that he had to block the barbarian leader. Otherwise, the consequences would be dire. The barbarians gave him a feeling that they were much stronger than Da Fei, 100 Luan master. Other than not being able to use Lunli to attack, this group of barbarians had the upper hand. He had to take more responsibility. Lei Xingfeng said, "Could Dashan find me a steel spear and stick it on the tree trunk?" Kudashin agreed. He stretched out his hand and asked for the best steel spear. He stuck it on the tree trunk and climbed up. He shouted, "The spear is in place. Afeng, be careful." Lei Xingfeng stopped attacking the barbarian leader and continued to shoot at the barbarians below. The hunters who fell from the tree were surrounded by barbarians. These barbarians were his main targets. In a few minutes, Lei Xingfeng saw that other than the barbarian leader, who continued to climb up, the barbarians below were either killed or hiding. He hung the black bough on a tree branch and pulled out his spear. He rushed towards the barbarian leader. The tree branches below were extremely thick. It was enough for a person to stand on and had enough support. Soon, Lei Xingfeng and the barbarian leader collided. Boom! Even with Xianfeng's Lei Lunli, his entire spear was covered in countless lightning arcs. This attack made him deeply experience the power of the barbarians. It was simply unparalleled. The spear in his hand was bent into a crooked ruler and flew out, blood dripping from his hand, shaking Xianfeng's head. He fiercely pounced to the side. The barbarian leader's giant axe smashed into the tree trunk, deeply sinking into it. However, the barbarian leader did not have it easy either. It was not that Lei Xingfeng was stronger than him, but when the axe collided with the spear, an electric current directly pierced into his body. This caused his whole body to tremble violently and stiffen. All the hunters were watching the two fight. Their hearts were beating like drums. Everyone knew that if Lei Xingfeng lost, there would not be many survivors. Lei Xingfeng quickly climbed up and shouted, "Give me another spear. I want the spear that the barbarian threw up just now." There were a few spears that the barbarians threw up that were stuck in the tree trunk. Song Yu immediately organized people to pull them out. A few of the strongest hunters worked together and barely managed to pull out one spear. However, the hunters could not help but exclaim. The spear was too thick. The handle was as thick as a bowl. A normal person's hand would not be able to hold it. Song Yu commanded, "Stick it here. We will continue to climb up. Empty the space." At this time, the remaining barbarians also began to climb up. The barbarian leader gritted his teeth and stared at Lei Xingfeng. He knew that this guy was the main culprit. Lei Xingfeng climbed to the place where the spear was stuck. He reached out and pulled out the spear. He lamented in his heart, "This thing is too thick." Even though he could hold it, it was not convenient to use. Jumping onto a thick branch, Lei Xingfeng saw the barbarian leader's head appear. He swung the spear up high and smashed it down crazily. Woo! The spear broke through the air. The barbarian leader could not help but curse loudly because he did not have a foothold. He swung his arm and swung his axe from below. Boom! The barbarian leader was shaken and slid down the tree trunk. Lei Xingfeng jumped onto another thick branch and swung the spear down again. At this time, the other 4 barbarians had already climbed up. The barbarian leader shouted a few words, and the other barbarians immediately surrounded him. The hunters on the tree frantically shouted to remind him. This time, Lei Xingfeng was in a passive position. 5 barbarians on the tree were not easy to deal with. He could only continue to smash the spear. Otherwise, the barbarians would climb higher than him. The hunters on the tree were also anxious. They could not just do nothing and let a child fight with the barbarians. Kudashin said in a low voice, No, I cannot let a Feng fight alone. I will help him. Ku Dashin climbed down, followed by a dozen other hunters. Sang Yu opened his mouth, but closed it in the end. He thought for a while and said, "Organize some people and bring some ropes. Even if we can't kill the barbarians, we can tie them down. This is the biggest help we can give to a Feng." He did not want to kill the enemy. He only wanted to tie down the barbarians. This idea was the most useful. Immediately, a dozen hunters organized the ropes and went down to help. Lei Xingfeng was so tired that he was panting. Even though he was born with superhuman strength, he was still lacking compared to the barbarians, even though he had already trained in Lunli. Finally, the barbarian leader found his foothold. His position was slightly lower than Lei Xingfeng. The other barbarians also climbed up, and Lei Xingfeng could not stop them. Holding the spear in his hand, Lei Xingfeng's eyes kept darting around. He was looking for a chance to kill the barbarians in one shot. Chapter 31. Finally, a barbarian overtook Lei Xingfeng's position and climbed onto a branch above his head. He got closer and closer and quickly stood up, ready to jump down. At this moment, a steel spear silently stabbed towards him from the side. No matter how thick a barbarian's skin was, it could not block the attack of a steel spear. After all, a barbarian's skin was not a bull's skin. Kill! Ku Dashin frantically stabbed with his steel spear. 7 or 8 steel spears intersected with each other. The hunters did not expect to kill the barbarian. They only wanted to force him down. Therefore, several of them tacitly rushed up. The barbarian was in a panic. He originally had a steel spear in his hand, but he threw it out at the beginning. Therefore, he was empty-handed. If he had a weapon, he would not be afraid of these thin steel spears. Lei Xingfeng kept sweeping with his spear. Only now did he realize that the barbarian was already above his head. He could not help but break out in cold sweat. If the barbarian jumped down, he knew that he would definitely fall down the tree. Even if he did not die, he would lose half of his life. While he was busy, he suddenly raised his hand and swept upwards. A dazzling light shot out from his finger and hit the barbarian above him. In an instant, the barbarian's body stiffened. Dozens of ropes were suddenly thrown out and quickly wrapped around the barbarian's body. Ku Dashin was overjoyed and shouted, "Kill!" Every hunter knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Everyone used all of their strength. Their muscles bulged as they crazily stabbed with their spears. Puff, puff, puff. 7 or 8 spears all pierced into the barbarian's body. The most fatal one was Ku Dashin's steel spear. It directly pierced through the barbarian's heart and killed him in one blow. After the hunter pulled out his spear, the rope around the barbarian loosened. The barbarian fell down from the tree head first. Countless broken branches and leaves fell to the ground with a loud crash. The barbarian leader howled crazily as he watched his men die one by one. He had never seen such a situation before. Even when he was surrounded by human experts, he had never seen such heavy casualties. Only he and 4 other barbarians were left. The rest of the barbarians were either dead or seriously injured. Now, another barbarian had been killed. How could he not go crazy? The barbarian didn't chop Lei Xingfeng. Instead, he shouted, and the other 3 barbarians closed in. Lei Xingfeng continuously retreated. Then, he realized that the barbarian leader had started to chop down the tree. He was chopping down the thick branch under his feet. The diameter of this branch was definitely more than 5 meters. But looking at the barbarian leader's huge tree that was as big as a door, cutting down this branch was really effortless. Ku Dashin and the others shouted anxiously, urging Lei Xingfeng to dodge quickly. The barbarian leader shouted, and the remaining 3 barbarians didn't step forward to fight. Instead, They protected the barbarian leader and covered him as he cut down the trees. Kudashin and the others immediately had the intention to fight with their lives on the line. He called out, and a few hunters came forward. Lei Xingfeng shouted, "Uncle Ku, back off, back off. I have a way to deal with this." Ku Dashin trusted Lei Xingfeng a lot. He immediately stopped moving forward and retreated with the hunters. Lei Xingfeng sneered and threw out an explosive lightning needle. He had a total of 4 explosive lightning needles. The power of a one-time use Luan weapon was great, but the downside was that once it was used up, it would be gone. Last time, he had already used one to deal with Ingyu, so he only had 3 explosive lightning needles left. So, unless it was absolutely necessary, he wouldn't use it. This time, he waited for the barbarians to gather together. Coincidentally, they were within the range of the explosive lightning needle. The explosive lightning needle flashed with a silver light. Its speed was incomparably fast as it went straight towards the 4 barbarians. The barbarian leader's reaction was also very fast. He didn't even see clearly what the needle was, but with his rich battle experience, he had already raised the huge axe in his hand to protect his vital parts. Lei Xingfeng shouted, "Explode!" A circle of lightning suddenly spread out and instantly engulfed the 4 barbarians. The barbarian leader's reaction was very fast. He raised the huge axe and hit it with an unparalleled force. The other 3 barbarians didn't even have time to block and were instantly turned into pieces of flesh. The barbarian leader was also heavily injured. The huge axe that saved his life fell out of his hand. The hand that was holding the handle was directly shattered. His 2 legs were also shattered. However, because of the protection of the huge axe, he didn't lose his life. However, he couldn't stand still and was directly hit by the huge force. With a crackling sound, the barbarian leader fell from a height of 150 meters. If it wasn't for the tree branches, falling from such a height would have been impossible. Luckily, the thick tree branches and leaves blocked his fall and saved his life. At this time, a barbarian rushed out from the bushes not far away. He grabbed the barbarian leader and desperately ran away. Lei Xingfeng shook his head in annoyance. He didn't think that there would still be a barbarian who could move. He clearly saw that the barbarian's arm had an arrow stuck in it. It should be the barbarian who temporarily hid during the attack. All the hunters on the huge tree let out a thunderous cheer. Everyone's heart was filled with the excitement of escaping death. They never thought that they would be able to escape this disaster. Because of this, they admired Lei Xingfeng from the bottom of their hearts. Song brought 7 or 8 captains of famous hunting teams to Xian Feng, thanking him. If it wasn't for Xian Feng's help this time, it would be considered lucky if half of them could make it back alive. Lei Xingfeng knew that his position as the master hunter was stable. Of course, he didn't care too much. After all, this wasn't his goal. He just wanted to become a mill-wheel master as soon as possible. Ku Dashin wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. The barbarian leader's chop really scared him. He said, "Luckily a Feng is strong. This barbarian is too scary." He cut a big hole in the tree with just a few slashes. Suddenly, a hunter screamed, "Wow, barbarian prey!" Suddenly, the people on the tree reacted. Screams and cries of joy mixed together. One must know that this group of barbarians was dragging 40 bull corpses. This was a big fortune. Lei Xingfeng immediately said, "Grandpa Hu, you arrange it. First, drive the wild beasts here. Then start transporting the bulls. We'll distribute them when we get back. The smell of blood is getting stronger. We need to move quickly." In fact, there were already wild beasts that had started dragging the corpses of the bulls and barbarians. Because there were so many corpses, the wild beasts hadn't started fighting yet. However, the threatening roars of the wild beasts could be heard. Sangyu ordered loudly. Many hunters came down from the tree. The woman hiding in the tree hole also followed. A few barbarians on the ground had already been dragged away by the wild beasts. Many of them were seriously injured. Sangyu immediately ordered the hunters to kill these barbarians. Then, they threw the barbarians outside to attract the wild beasts. The hunters didn't have the strength of the barbarians, so they had to cut up the bulls and transport them. Luckily, there were a lot of people this time. The 40 bulls were quickly dismembered, and the large pieces of meat were placed into baskets. Not only did each person have to carry a large basket, they also had to carry a large bag of meat with another person. Lei Xingfeng led a dozen strong hunters and circled the crowd. Lei Xingfeng didn't stop shooting arrows, killing the wild beasts that got too close. After a few rounds, he actually killed 2 large leopards, 1 black tiger for violent bears, and a dozen red spotted wolf dogs. None of the arrows missed. 1 arrow took down a beast. Everyone felt a chill run down their spine. These were also prey, so they immediately ordered people to carry them away. Food was hard to come by during the winter, so they couldn't waste any. Sangyu's face was red with excitement. Although many hunters died in this hunt, the harvest was also huge. If they could successfully transport the prey back to Tiger Cliff, then this winter wouldn't be so difficult for Tiger Cliff Castle. At noon, Sangyu gave the order, and everyone began to move towards Tiger Cliff Castle. Along the way, everyone was singing and laughing. Everyone was overflowing with joy. Tiger Cliff Castle celebrated for 2 days. Everyone worked together to organize the prey, skin, pickle, and distribute it. Lei Xingfeng got the biggest share. 2 bulls and some other prey, as well as a few bull hides and horns. Lei Xingfeng kept the meat and replaced the hides and horns with tapioca flour and flour. There were also dried wild fruits and dried vegetables. These were all good things for the winter. The success of this hunt let everyone in Tiger Cliff Castle breathe a sigh of relief. Every hunting team only needed to hunt some normal prey before the winter arrived, such as pheasants, rabbits, and other small animals to supplement their food supply. According to this year's weather, the elders said that this year's winter would definitely not be good. It should be a super cold season. Lei Xingfeng, Elder Thunderstorm, and the little girl Lei Xianyao were busy collecting wood and rotten wood in the back of the mountain. Winter required a lot of fuel. There was a large forest in the back of the mountain. There were many dead trees in the forest, which were excellent fuel. Whether it was Lei Xingfeng or Thunderstorm, they both had good strength. Lei Xianyao helped tie them up. Although the little girl was young, her strength wasn't small. She was also very nimble, so she was definitely a good helper. These few days, there were many elders and children in the back of the mountain. They were all collecting wood and dried leaves. When the warm season was about to end, it was also the season for wild fruits. Many fruits ripened and hung on the branches. Lei Xingfeng and Thunderstorm not only had to carry large amounts of wood, they also had to pick ripe fruits and bring them back to dry. Lei Xingfeng's family of 3 quickly collected enough wood and a large amount of wild fruits. The wood had to be split, and the fruits had to be dried. For the past 10 days, other than the fixed time for training and sleeping, they spent all their time on this. When the first snow fell, Lei Xingfeng's family had already prepared all the food and fuel. Chapter 32. Just the barbarian beef alone cost close to 10,000 pounds. Out of the 3, the happiest was Xianyao. She knew that she would not be hungry this winter. That feeling of being cold and hungry, she really did not like it. The old man said, "Afong, the food has been prepared. At the beginning of the winter, there will be a big snowstorm, and often there will be thunderstorm snow mixed with rain. So I plan to bring you out. I still need some stimulation, training by myself. It will be hard for me to completely recover my strength. Lei Xingfeng said, going out in the winter? That's too dangerous. He knew that no one dared to go out in the winter. Once one got lost in the wild, it would be hard to come back. The winter in the wild was a forbidden area for normal people. The old man laughed. You are not a normal person now. You are a 1,000 Luan master. Or else do you think you can kill so many barbarians and steal their prey? Lei Xingfeng said, what about Yao Yao? He really did not feel safe leaving the little girl at home. After all, she was only 6 years old. The old man said, don't worry. Let Yao Yao go to Dashin's house and let them take care of her. We will be back soon. When the winter ends, we should leave Tiger Cliff Castle. Hee, didn't you always want to go out? Lei Xingfeng thought for a while and called Xi and Yao. Yao Yao, Yi and I will be going out for a while. You can go to Kudashin's house and stay for a while. Xi and Yao's little face immediately fell. She pulled Lei Xingfeng and said, Brother, can you bring me along? She looked at him pitifully, her eyes glistening with tears. Lei Xingfeng immediately lost. He said, Yi. The old man laughed bitterly. He said, Yao Yao, your body is too weak. You cannot withstand the cold outside. If you go with us, it will be very dangerous. 2 drops of tears fell. Xi and Yao just looked at the old man, and Lei Xingfeng silently crying. Lei Xingfeng hurriedly wiped her tears. He kept saying, don't cry, Yao Yao, don't cry. He reached out and hugged Xi and Yao. This little girl was obedient and sensible. He loved her to the bone. He did not want her to be sad at all. The old man sighed. He said, all right, since our family will not be separated, let's go together, but Feng, you take care of Yao Yao. Xi and Feng nodded. I'll carry little sister. Xi and Yao's tears still, but she was already smiling happily. The old man said, Yao Yao, in the wild in the winter, can you endure it? You can't complain outside. Xi and Yao, Yao Yao, Yao Yao, Yao Yao to Yao Yao. The old man's strength was high, and Lei Xingfeng was also a master. Protecting a child was not a big problem. The reason why he did not want to bring Xi and Yao was because he did not want the little girl to suffer. Actually, Lei Xingfeng also did not want Xi and Yao to stay in Tiger Cliff Castle. He did not want Xi and Yao to suffer at all. This time, they had obtained a large amount of fur. Of course, it was too late to sew fur coats now. So Lei Xingfeng took these furs and went directly to the patriarch to exchange for fur coats. After everything was prepared, the 3 of them left Tiger Cliff Castle. The 3 of them were wrapped in thick fur coats. Lei Xingfeng carried his black bow and a steel spear. The old man Thunderstorm also carried a steel spear. Lei Xingfeng also carried a large basket. If necessary, he could let Xi and Yao sit in the basket. With his strength, carrying a child was not a problem at all. Snow fell from the sky, and from time to time, thunder could be heard in the sky. Lei Xingfeng also felt that it was interesting in this world. Even if it was snowing, there would also be thunder. The so-called thunderstorm snow was the specialty of this world. Because the old man's hidden Luan space was opened, all the food was put in by the old man, so they did not carry much. In Lei Xingfeng's basket, there were many thick furs for sleeping at night and a small amount of food. In case they got separated, they would not lack food. Lei Xingfeng held Xi and Yao's hand and followed the old man through the forest with difficulty. The first snow turned the whole of Tiger Cliff Castle into a white world. Every household had a stove for warmth, and the hunters began to enjoy their once-a-year leisure time. Although they could not go out to hunt in the winter, it was the best time to rest and practice martial arts, especially for hunters with children. The whole winter was a time for teaching and learning. As long as they stored enough food and fuel during the warm season, they could live comfortably during the cold season. This was also a good opportunity for the hunters of Tiger Cliff Castle to interact with each other. With so many people coming and going, there was no need to worry about getting lost in Tiger Cliff Castle. No matter how heavy the snowstorm was, Tiger Cliff Castle, which was built under the cliff, was a long winding road. It was very convenient to visit one another. 17 days after Lei Xingfeng and his family left Tiger Cliff Castle, the sky gradually became clear, and the 17 days of continuous snowstorm finally stopped. A group of about 300 people walked out from Lead Eagles. The leader was Yu, who had his face pierced by Lei Xingfeng. Beside him was Da Fei and his master Chia. The ones chatting with Chia were a man and a woman, and it was obvious that Chia was very respectful towards them. An elder of Hong Tong brought along his female disciple. The male was an outer sect elder called Hong Chen, while the female disciple was called Yen Yen. Like Chia, she was a Milun master. Her master, however, was an extraordinary person. Hong Chen had already condensed his first true ring body and had become a real Milun master who had transcended mortals. From Wan Luanshi to a mill wheel master, one could eliminate 90% of practitioners, and from a mill wheel master to a true mill wheel master, condensing one's own true ring body was a huge threshold for practice. The ideal goal of any mill wheel master was to condense one's own true ring body and become a true mill wheel master. Once they become a true mill wheel master, they would truly be extraordinary. In any sect or organization, a true mill wheel master could take up the most important position. They were respected and had great strength. Yen Yan's expression was cold as she walked to one side. Behind her were 10 strong men wearing black fur coats, all of them Thousand Luan masters. This was Hong Tong's cleanup team, specially used to clean up barbarians, and their strength was quite strong. Yu's face was red, but his cheeks had not recovered, and there were still 2 holes left. Normally, he had suffered a lot, and whatever he ate, he would leak out. Drinking water was even more painful. This time, he was able to invite his master, especially the outer sect elder of Hong Tong who was in charge of cleanup barbarians, and even brought along a cleanup team of 10. He felt much better. As long as he could take revenge, everything was worth it. He and Da Fei stood to one side, and the 2 of them were talking. In this place, only Da Fei could understand Yu's words, and the others could not understand Yu's strange pronunciation. Da Fei said softly, "Uncle, what if that kid agrees to go with the elder? Then wouldn't we have no way to take revenge?" Yu muttered a few words, and Da Fei nodded, "That's true. With one look, I can tell that kid is very arrogant and will definitely not agree. At that time, the elder will make a move. Uncle, how do you plan to take revenge?" Yu muttered again, accompanied by the sound of grinding teeth. Da Fei secretly shivered. He realized that his uncle had become abnormal. Chia said lightly, "Da Fei, have you been to Tiger Cliff Castle?" Da Fei ran up and said, "Sir, Tiger Cliff Castle is a famous, dangerous place. The place they live in is surrounded by cliffs, and the only way in is through a hanging basket. If we want to enter Tiger Cliff Castle, we must take control of the stone castle where the hanging basket is placed. The stone castle is on top of the cliff." Chia turned his head and said, "Master Du, Junior Yin, this is a difficult problem. If we want to attack Tiger Cliff Castle, we must take control of the stone castle on top of the cliff." Hong Chun smiled faintly and said, "That's not a problem. Just leave it to me. My only question is whether or not that kid has a single lightning attribute Luan mark." Chia said, "My disciple confirms it, but I have never seen it. A single lightning attribute Luan mark is too rare. No matter if it's true or not, it should be worth a trip." Hong Chen said, "Yu, come here." Yu hurriedly ran over. He was not stupid and had been eavesdropping. Hong Chen said, "Are you sure?" Yu muttered a few words, and Hong Chen said bluntly, "If you're sure, then nod your head. If you're not sure, then shake your head. Who can understand your muttering?" Ingyu choked until he rolled his eyes. He did not dare to talk back to Hong Chen. This guy was a killing star. Killing him was like killing a chicken. Even his master could not save him. He nodded his head like a chicken pecking at rice. His face was also pale. Yen found it hard to maintain her cold appearance. She covered her face and laughed lightly. Ingyu's appearance was really pitiful. Hong Chen sighed and said, "If it's really a single lightning attribute, Luan Mark, then I probably won't be able to get him. He'll be directly taken by the elders of the inner sect." Then he said, "Pass down the order. Once we enter Tiger Cliff Castle, I am not allowed to kill. Not a single person. Just intimidate them. Once it's confirmed that the kid has a single lightning attribute, Luan Mark, then everything will be easy to discuss." Dafei gathered his courage and asked, "Sir, if it's not a single lightning attribute, Luan Mark?" Hong Chen laughed coldly. Then he and Tiger Cliff Castle were unlucky. Dafei and Ingyu immediately revealed a happy expression. Then Hong Chen said, "Then you too are unlucky." The meaning of these words was very clear. Once it was confirmed that Lei Xingfeng did not have a single lightning attribute, Luan Mark, not only would Lei Xingfeng die, but the people of Tiger Cliff Castle would also die. Even Ingyu and Dafei would not be able to live. Yen said coldly, "My master hates it when people lie to him." Not only did Dafei and Ingyu's scalp go numb, even Chia's legs went soft. Although he was a mill-wheel master, but compared to Hong Chen, he was far from it. Don't look at the difference. A mill-wheel master and a real mill-wheel master. In reality, the difference between the two was like heaven and earth, no matter if it was strength or status. The large group of people headed towards Tiger Cliff Castle. Chapter 33. Lei Xingfeng's family of 3 was trekking in the wilderness looking for thunderstorm snow. At the beginning of the winter, there would often be this kind of weird weather with thunder and snow. This was the so-called thunderstorm snow. Lei Xingfeng had experienced this kind of weather before. After all, he had experienced a few winter seasons since he came to this world. Lei Xingfeng's basket was Lei Xingfeng's Lei Xingyao. She used a thick fur coat to cover her body, only revealing her small head. There was also a big fur hat on her head. Her 2 small hands were wrapped around Lei Xingfeng's neck for warmth. She seemed to be very happy, and she kept asking questions. She had lived in Tiger Cliff Castle since she was born, and had never taken a step out of Tiger Cliff Castle. Once she entered the wilderness, there were too many things that made her curious. The old man, Thunderstorm, led the way in front. The reason why there were no hunters in the winter was because the weather was extremely cold, and the second reason was that it was very easy to get lost in the wilderness. When all around was white snow, if one was not an experienced hunter, getting lost was almost certain. The third reason was that the beasts in the winter were very fierce, and because hunting was not easy, most of the fierce beasts were hungry. Even the best hunters were not willing to provoke hungry beasts. The most important thing was that during the winter, no one knew when a snowstorm would start. That kind of snowstorm was very hard for humans to withstand. Whether it was getting lost or the cold, to a hunter, it was a road to death. Therefore, during the winter, unless the family ran out of food, hunters would definitely not come out to hunt. Even if they did, they would only dare to hunt near human settlements. Thunderstorm had a rope tied around his waist, and the other end was tied to Lei Xingfeng's waist. Even if the 2 of them were very strong, they still needed a rope to keep them together. If they got separated in a snowstorm, the old man Thunderstorm would definitely be fine, but Lei Xingfeng and Lei Xingyao might not be. The 2 of them were very different in terms of knowledge and experience, so for safety reasons, the old man still used a rope to keep the 2 of them together. There might not be lightning in a blizzard. The old man searched for lightning based on his senses. The journey was extremely difficult. Lei Xingfeng used a piece of fur to cover his nose and mouth, only revealing his eyes. He knew from his past life that walking in the snow could easily cause eye injuries, which was snow blindness. There were no sunglasses in this world, but after training Lunli, it shouldn't be a big problem. Lei Xingfeng's head was almost completely covered by a large fur hat, and her eyes were also covered by the long fur. Lei Xingfeng walked slowly as he whispered to Xi and Yao, "Yao Yao, don't stare at the snow. Your eyes will hurt." Xi and Yao giggled. "It won't. I'll look through the long hair. My eyes won't hurt." "Brother, where are we going?" Lei Xingfeng said, "I don't know either. If we follow Yi, Yi will know." Xi and Yao asked, "Brother, are you tired?" Lei Xingfeng's heart was filled with warmth. This little girl really knew how to care for people. He said, "I'm not tired. This bit of road can't stop me." The old man shook the rope. Lei Xingfeng understood, and immediately quickened his pace, quickly arriving behind the old man, and said, "Yi, what's wrong?" "Let's rest for a bit. It's getting dark. I'll find a place to spend the night. You and Yao Yao stay here, and don't move. Don't leave. I'll be back in a while." The old man untied the rope at his waist, holding the steel spear. His body flashed and disappeared into the snow. Lei Xingfeng slowly sat down. He didn't put down the basket. Still carrying it, he said, "It's getting dark, but the ground is still so bright. Yao Yao, are you scared?" At this time, the snow had lessened, and they could see a dozen meters away. Relying on his Lunli, he could clearly feel movements within a few hundred meters. It was almost impossible for a beast to ambush them. About 10 minutes later, the old man came back. He said, "I found an ancient tree. Let's go." The so-called ancient tree was a super large tree. There were many of these trees in the wasteland. Generally speaking, an ancient tree would have many large holes. It was the habitat of hunters and beasts, especially those that liked to climb trees, such as leopards and snow leopards. This was a hole about 6 to 7 square meters. The hole wasn't big. After Lei Xingfeng came in, he was very satisfied. He quickly put down the basket, took out a thick beast skin, and put it on the ground, then carried Xi and Yao out. He said, "Yao Yao, move your arms and legs. Are you cold?" Xi and Yao laughed. "I'm not cold. I've always been warm." As she spoke, she moved her body, then sat on the beast skin. Lei Xingfeng took out a long fur beast skin and put it on her. The old man stood at the hole, staring at the sky. After a while, he sighed. "It's already been 6 days. We still haven't found the area of thunderstorm snow. Let's rest here today. I'll go find some dry wood." As he spoke, he took out a copper pot from his lunchong space, a bag of marinated bull meat, and a small bag of dried mushrooms and dried fruits. Lei Xingfeng nodded. "I'll go find a few hard wooden sticks." He then said to Xi and Yao, "Yao Yao, wait here. If there's any danger, blow the whistle." Xi and Yao said, "Okay." Lei Xingfeng didn't dare to go too far. He looked for branches on the giant tree. He used his dagger to cut 5 to 6 thick branches and quickly returned to the hole. After cutting off the branches, he quickly made a wooden frame and hung the copper pot. He then scooped some snow and put it in the pot. Only then did he start to process the bull meat. Xi and Yao bit her finger, staring at the meat in the pot. She was actually very hungry, but she didn't want to say anything. She waited patiently. The old man brought a pile of dead wood. The thick wood was taken out from his lunchong space. The old man casually waved his hand. The thick wood immediately broke apart. After a few continuous strokes, the 4-meter-long wood was cut into many pieces. He straightened the wood up. The old man still extended a finger and casually waved it. Pieces of square wooden sticks appeared in a pile. Lei Xingfeng was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out. This was too exaggerated. He never knew that Lunli could be used like this. Xi and Yao clapped. "Yi is so powerful." The old man said, "This is nothing. It's just a way of using Lunli. You can do it too. It's recorded in the Star Python records." Lei Xingfeng nodded. "And I haven't seen this record yet." The old man suddenly laughed. I found something good. Hee hee, your luck is not bad. As he spoke, he took out 2 red fruits. They were only the size of walnuts. Lei Xingfeng took them and asked, "What kind of fruit is this?" The old man said, "Blood fruit, also called snow fruit. It only grows during snowstorms. When the snowstorm ends, the fruit will fall into the soil." Lei Xingfeng asked, "Ayi, what's so special about this fruit?" The old man said, "And it can relax the muscles, improve blood circulation, and increase cold resistance." Lei Xingfeng asked, "Ayi, did you eat it?" The old man said, "It's useless for me to eat it. You eat it, the weather is too cold." Lei Xingfeng nodded. He extended his hand and passed the blood fruit to Xai and Yao. "Yao Yao, you eat it." The old man said, "One for each person. It's useless to eat too much." Only then did Lei Xingfeng and Xai and Yao eat one each. A warm feeling surged up. The feeling was very comfortable. Xai and Yao smacked her lips and said, "It's delicious." The old man laughed. "Of course it's delicious. It's just that this thing is too rare. It needs to be just right for it to ripen. The time it takes for it to fall is too short. If it wasn't a coincidence, I wouldn't have been able to see it. Our luck is not bad. A phone, you start the fire. Just use Lei Lunli." Lei Xingfeng knew this technique. He picked up a piece of dead wood, put his hands together, and rubbed it hard. Immediately the wood was broken into threads. The lightning at his fingertips ignited the threads in an instant. He quickly set the wood up. The fire quickly rose. In a moment, the whole tree hole was as warm as spring. Lei Xingfeng quickly cut the cured meat into small pieces. He scooped some snow and put it into the copper pot. Only then did he close the pot lid. He concentrated on the fire. Gurgling sounds could be heard. A strong meat fragrance spread out. Lei Xingfeng then put in the dried fruits and dried mushrooms. A sweet fragrance mixed with the meat fragrance floated out. Lei Xingfeng couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva, making a gulping sound. Lei Xingfeng patted her little head and said, "It'll be done soon." Since the cured meat had enough salt, he didn't need to add any more salt. Lei Xingfeng took out 3 pairs of chopsticks and 3 wooden bowls. He passed them to the old man, and Xai and Yao, he said, "Eat." The copper pot was very big. Small mouthfuls deep into the stomach. The 3 people ate the meat in big mouthfuls and drank the thick soup. Very quickly the 3 people's heads were covered in sweat. In just 10 minutes, a big pot of meat was in their stomachs. Xai and Yao laid on the animal skin, rubbing her stomach. She had an extremely satisfied expression, making the old man and Lei Xingfeng laugh. The old man sighed in his heart. After he was seriously injured, he often didn't even have enough to eat while raising the 2 little fellows. Thinking about it made him sad. But this time, his old injury relied on the trick Lei Xingfeng found. He had basically recovered. As long as he went through the baptism of lightning a few more times, he had the confidence to reach his peak. He even had the confidence to go one step further. Once he completely recovered, the sea and sky would be wide open. These 2 children would also not suffer any more harm or pain. He believed that with his own strength he would be able to hold up the sky, but he forgot he wasn't an ordinary person. He was a fierce demon with enemies all over the world. He used to be a lone wolf, but now he had 2 children. When the old man understood, all of them would be involved, but this was a story for later. After eating, the 3 people wrapped themselves in thick animal skins and slept. Xai and Yao directly snuggled into Lei Xingfeng's embrace. That was the warmest place. In the middle of the night, a sudden clap of thunder sounded. The old man jumped up in surprise. Lei Xingfeng and Xai and Yao were both awakened by the thunder. Lei Xingfeng said, "Thunderstorm snow." The old man laughed loudly. "That's right, our luck is not bad. Ha ha, Feng, you stay here and take care of Yao Yao. I'll be back soon." Lei Xingfeng said, "Be careful." Xai and Yao hugged Lei Xingfeng, her eyes hazy. She said, "Brother, sleepy." Lei Xingfeng said, "Sleep, sleep." The old man carried the steel spear out of the tree hole. He didn't go anywhere else, but climbed up the huge tree. Chapter 34. In a moment, he reached the top of the tree, and with a slap of his palm, the huge treetop fell. He raised his spear and stabbed it into the tree trunk. He raised his head and stared at the sky. Streaks of lightning flashed through the clouds. He held the spear and started to circulate Luan Enli just a little bit more, and he would be able to convert Luan Enli into Enli. At that time, he would be able to recover his original strength. Lunli, Luan Enli. Until Enli, these were the 3 levels of strength. Lunli was the lowest level, and Enli was the highest level. Kacha hung, attracted by the old man's strength. A streak of lightning struck down from the sky and hit the spear. At that moment, the old man was like a light bulb emitting a dazzling light. A huge amount of energy flowed into his body through the spear. Lei Xingfeng used the beast's skin to wrap Xian Yao and placed her in the corner of the tree hole. Only then did he walk to the entrance of the tree hole. He could already feel the dense Lei Li, but he did not dare to leave. The little girl was sleeping in the tree hole. If there was no one to protect her, if a wild beast came in, he would not be able to handle the consequences. So he sat at the entrance of the tree hole and started to train. When he started to train, Lei Xingfeng felt the difference. His Lei Lunli increased rapidly. Originally, his Lei Lunli increased 1 by 1, but now it increased by tens of Lei Lunli. In less than a minute, he had increased by hundreds of Lei Lunli. No wonder his grandfather wanted him to train in a thunderstorm. This kind of increase in strength was indeed very satisfying. Above his head, there were continuous explosions and streaks of lightning striking down. Lei Xingfeng's strength increased crazily. Xian Yao had completely woken up. She saw Lei Xingfeng sitting at the entrance of the tree hole, his body emitting a faint silver light. She obediently hid in the beast's skin and quietly watched. She instinctively knew that this was not the time to disturb her brother. As long as she could see her brother, it was enough to put her heart at ease. The grandfather and granddaughter's strength was increasing rapidly. However, one was recovering his strength while the other was increasing his strength. The duration of the thunderstorm snow was not long. When the sky started to brighten, the thunderstorm snow had already ended. However, the snow continued to fall. Lei Xingfeng let out a long sigh of relief. In just half a night's time, he had almost reached 10,000 luns. This kind of terrifying speed of improvement was something he did not expect. However, he still had to consolidate and condense his Lei Lunli. The old man quickly came down from the top of the tree. He walked into the tree hole with a face full of joy. Lei Xingfeng asked, "Ayi, how is it?" The old man smiled and said, "Very good. One more time, and I'll be completely healed." Ha ha. Lei Xingfeng and the old man sat down. Lei Xingfeng walked over with a thick fur. She buried her head into Lei Xingfeng's embrace and covered her body with the fur. When Lei Xingfeng was cultivating, she didn't sleep at all. At this time, she was already very sleepy. She was like a puppy that found its nest. She buried herself in Lei Xingfeng's embrace. That warm environment quickly made her fall asleep peacefully. The wrinkles on the old man's face became less and less. He had a rosy complexion that only young people would have. His back was straight, and his eyes were full of vigor. It was as if he had become a completely different person. Lei Xingfeng did not know what kind of strength the old man had. However, he was very clear about the old man's changes. He was very excited. The old man's strength meant that he and Lei Xingyao would be safe. This world was not safe. With an expert like his grandfather protecting him and his little sister, he did not feel the slightest bit of resistance. "Ah, Yi, if we leave Tiger Cliff Castle, where will we go?" The old man smiled and said, "What? You finally can't take it anymore?" He. Lei Xingfeng smiled and said, Yes, I've lived here for too long. I want to go out and take a look. The old man said, I'll take you with me. I don't want to stay here any longer. He sighed and said, I thought I would die in this godforsaken place. I didn't think that there would be a day for me to turn things around. Ha ha. He became excited again. Lei Xingfeng said, Yi, I still need more than 1,000 luns before I can step into Wanluan Shi. The old man was unable to contain his joy and said, Good, very good. I'll teach you a set of Lunli training methods. It can quickly purify your Lei Lunli. Lei Xingfeng said, The star python record doesn't record the method. The old man shook his head. He began to teach the entire training method. The training method was very simple. Lei Xingfeng already understood once the old man explained. He said, This is Lunli. The Lunli chases and presses, quickly moving within the body. This will it be effective? This method was simple to the point that Lei Xingfeng didn't believe it. The old man sighed and said, The simpler the method, the more effective it is. Just like how I never thought that directly absorbing lightning would have such a strong effect. If I had discovered this method before I was injured, I wouldn't have run here to live in seclusion. The Lunli method can be used by anyone who cultivates Lunli. This is a method that I created. Other than your little sister, don't tell anyone else. This method is very easy to learn, but the effect is very good, especially in the Lunli and Luan Yinli stages. It is the best method to purify Lunli. The old man said with unusual seriousness. Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, Yes, I'll remember. His reply was also very serious. After resting for a day, there was still no thunderstorm snow that night. The next morning, the old man brought Lei Xingfeng and Lei Xian Yao to continue walking in the snowy plains, looking for traces of thunderstorm snow. After a day and night of Lunli training, Lei Xingfeng's Lunli didn't increase, but each Lunli became extremely strong. Moreover, after the Lunli condensed into rings, it was very easy to use. On the way, the old man would occasionally teach different ways to use Lunli. These were all secrets that couldn't be passed down. In any sect, other than the master and disciple, it was impossible to receive such wholehearted teaching. Many sect disciples received training methods that were very crude and simple. Only those with genius aptitude, who were heavily nurtured by the sect, would receive resources and training methods. Of course, those with genius aptitude would usually be accepted as disciples by great experts. Some things could be recorded, some things couldn't be recorded, and had to be memorized. At night, other than learning these techniques, Lei Xingfeng would also organize the star python records and record down some of his experiences. With a great expert like the old man Thunderstorm, there wasn't any danger on the way. From time to time, they would even kill some ferocious beasts and obtain some fresh meat. If the weather was clear, Lei Xingfeng would let Lei Xian Yao walk on her own and strengthen her training. She was still young and hadn't reached the stage of training Lunli yet, so she had to train her body. The little girl could bear hardships and was very serious when training. Sometimes, even Lei Xingfeng couldn't bear to see her like this. Lei Xian Yao didn't feel any discomfort. She happily ran on the snowy ground. According to Ye's teachings, she could find some wild fruits on the branches. In the forest, she was more used to it than Yi and her brother. The old man sighed. As expected of the life attribute, it has a natural affinity with the forest. Once Yao Yao starts training, she will definitely be very fast. If Yao Yao can train to the level of a mill-wheel master, a foam, you will be lucky. This was something that Lei Xingfeng already knew. People with green Lunli were the best at refining the essence of plants and condensing it into medicinal liquid. It was extremely useful for healing injuries and increasing Lunley. Green Lunley was also a rare potential. Normally, it would appear in 3 or 4 Lunley. It belonged to the mixed Lunley category, but Lei Xingfeng had a single attribute green Lunley. Without a doubt, this type of aptitude was also extremely good. The large group of lead eagles had already arrived at the bottom of the cliff of Tiger Cliff Castle. Hong Chen raised his head and looked at the cliff that was almost 100 feet high. He praised, "This place is really not bad. The terrain is dangerous, easy to defend but hard to attack. Your lead eagle's terrain is much worse." Yu could only nod his head continuously. His words were annoying, so he just stopped talking. De Fei looked at the cliff. After a while, he said, "How do we get in?" Hong Chen said, "Very simple. First, let Chia climb up and then throw down the rope. Then, let the cleanup team go up, first to seize the castle and control the entrance." This place is indeed not easy to enter. Once we control the entrance and exit of the castle and the hanging basket, the people of Tiger Cliff Castle won't be able to escape. For a hunter, climbing 100 feet high cliff on a snowy day was an almost impossible task. But for a mill wheel master, this cliff was not a problem. The hunters of lead eagles were not at the location of the castle, but a few hundred meters to the side to avoid being discovered. Attacking Tiger Cliff Castle was not realistic because the terrain here was too good. Even if Hong Chun had a true ring body and was a real mill wheel master, he could not directly fly up. He had to climb up the cliff. If there were attacks along the way, he would also have to block them. There were not many points of support on the cliff, and since it was snowing, there were many icicles hanging on the cliff. Chia carefully observed from the bottom of the cliff. He needed to find a way up. It would be best if there was a point of support. He wore tight leather clothes. As a mill wheel master, he could condense his own Mi Ring armor. Similar to Lunley armor, the Mi Ring armor was condensed from Lunley for protection, so he was not worried about his own defense. After searching a few times, Chia began to lament in his heart. This cliff was too steep. There were even parts of the cliff that protruded outwards. Especially the top, it was impossible to climb up. There were only a few places, but there were many icicles hanging on them. Hong Chen said, "Have you found a way up?" Chia laughed bitterly and said, "This section is not a problem, but in the middle section, there is an icicle hanging there. We need to cross this icicle and move to the left. Following that crack, there is still hope of climbing up. It is too dangerous." He checked a few more times and began to lose confidence. Hong Chen said, "Keep looking, we will definitely find a way out. I don't believe that with such a long cliff, there won't be a suitable place." How did the people from Tiger Cliff Castle enter? Extermination team, split up and search. "Be careful, don't go to the castle." Everyone agreed, and immediately spread out to find a suitable place to climb. Hong Chen raised his head and looked at the cliff, thinking, "Fuck, if there is no other way, I will climb up myself." Chapter 35. After all, the more people there are, the easier it is to do things. Very quickly, they found 3 climbing points. However, after Hong Chen and Chia's confirmation, 2 of the climbing points were not suitable. Only one route was passable, but this climbing point was already close to the stone castle. Hong Chen and the others hid behind a large tree. From here, they could already see the stone castle on the cliff. Chia said, "No, they will find us easily." Yen said lightly, "Be careful. As long as you can get up there, a few hunters will not be your match." Hong Chen nodded. "After you get up there, you can even ignore the hunters. Go there and throw down the rope. Wait for the clearing team to come up and take control of the stone castle. It will be very easy for us to take over Tiger Cliff Castle. Chia felt a bit of regret. This road was too dangerous. Even if he had the Mi ring armor, if he fell from a high place, he would at least be seriously injured. However, thinking about the conditions Hong Chun had given him, which was to be transferred out of by clan village to manage an area outside, this was much better than staying in by clan village. He said, "I'll try." Hong Chun nodded. "Go. Be careful. Is the rope ready?" Chia nodded. The rope had already been placed in his hidden Luan space, so he did not need to carry the heavy rope. He did not directly go out, but instead followed the boundary between the forest and the cliff, leaving the stone castle's line of sight. Then he went to the bottom of the cliff and followed the cliff back up. At this time, the snow had lessened, and his vision had become clearer. Hong Chun nodded. Chia is still quite cautious. Yin said, "Master, if you succeed this time, you may be able to enter the inner sect and obtain a better position." Hong Chen's face revealed a trace of a smile. "I hope they did not make a mistake." His gaze swept across Yu and Defei, scaring them to the point that their foreheads were covered in sweat. Chia followed the cliff and climbed up. He had already thought about this route many times. There were a few important checkpoints, and he had already thought of a way to solve them, especially the two places with icicles that he needed to get rid of. These icicles were not important to him, but how to get rid of them without alerting the sentries of the stone castle was a big problem. Relying on his powerful skills, Chia quickly reached the first checkpoint. After all, he was a mill wheel master. That was an existence that surpassed Wan Luan Shi. Originally, this kind of cliff was not in his eyes. However, it was different this time. And in a few seconds, firstly, it was one of his hands had actually and the weather was bad into the ice wall. Secondly, after to avoid the testing, his whole body was hanging on top. The ice checkpoint was a 2-meter wide third of the way up the cliff. He needed to cross it horizontally in order to find a way to continue upwards. He let out a sigh of relief. In a flash, on the power of Chia's hand pressed against the ice wall. He easily melted the ice wall and found support. Hong Chun praised. "A very smart guy, to be able to pass it so easily." Chia was secretly pleased with himself. He continued to climb, his speed gradually decreasing. He had already reached 2/3 of the height of the cliff and was at the second pass. This was a series of small ice walls. Before the snow had fallen, they had been formed by very small streams of water on the cliff. Yin said, "Looks like there won't be any problems. Chia will definitely be able to make it up." Chia, on the other hand, was faced with a difficult problem. The cliff was slightly protruding outwards, and he could not find any foothold. When he was below, he could not tell that the cliff was slanting outwards. If he could not find a foothold, he would have to forcefully break through the cliff. If he did that, he would definitely be discovered by the sentries on the stone fort. At this moment, he saw something that made him overjoyed. It was a metal ring. Chia's first thought was that it should have been left behind by someone who had entered Tiger Cliff Castle. He tried to extend his hand to hook onto the ring and pulled it down. He found that the ring was firmly nailed into the slanting rock. He could not help but reveal a happy expression. He thought, "Even the heavens are helping me to destroy Tiger Cliff Castle." His whole body was hanging on the ring. Chia found that the ring was still firmly secured. Only then did he relax. In order to save energy, he naturally used Lunli. When the Lunli flowed into his arm, the hoop suddenly flashed. Chia reacted instantly and screamed. This was 2F asterisk King Deceitful. This was an extremely simple trap, a Lunli hoop trap. If Chia did not use Lunli and only used his own strength, this trap would not activate. If it was a normal person, this hoop would be very safe. However, once Lunli was used, this Lunli hoop trap would explode and shatter instantly. It must be known that Chia was hanging on the ring, and the cliff was slanting outwards. He had no support point. The scariest thing was that the lonely ring would explode when he was the most relaxed and least vigilant. Even if he was more powerful, he would not be able to react. Even if Hong Chun was here, he would most likely also fall for this trap. This was too sinister. The sound of the lonely ring exploding was not loud, but Chia's screams were too loud. Ah, ah, he screamed all the way as he fell from the cliff. Hong Chun cursed and immediately rushed out. He couldn't just watch Chia fall to his death. The death of a few hundred Luan masters and 1,000 Luan masters, he didn't have any psychological burden, but the death of a Milun master, he also had a huge responsibility. Milun masters were the backbone of the forces, and losing one was a big deal. The speed at which he fell from the cliff was extremely fast. Luckily, there were no protruding rocks below. Otherwise, with one hit, he would have lost half his life before he even reached the bottom of the cliff. Hong Chun instantly released a gust of wind. That gust of wind was very unique. It was as if there were countless rings, from small to large. In an instant, it wrapped around Chia. Seeing him quickly spinning in the gust of wind, Chia suddenly felt dizzy and let out a strange cry. However, it was this spinning gust of wind that allowed Chia to reduce the force of his fall. Bang! Chia's head slammed into the ground. Chia used his Mi Ring armor to easily block the impact, but when he stood up, he couldn't stand straight. He staggered drunkenly as he walked over. He said, "Motherf asterisk cur. To Motherf asterisk cur. I'm going to faint. Bastard." Pa! Hong Chun raised his hand and slapped him. Covering his face, Chia finally sobered up a little. He immediately understood that it was Hong Chun who saved him. Shaking his head, he said, "Thank you, Master Du." Even though he was slapped, he still had to thank him. Hong Chun said, "What happened? Why did it suddenly fall?" Chia was furious. "Motherf asterisk cur. There's actually a trap on the cliff. A Lunley ring is too damaging." Hong Chun asked curiously, "Lunley ring? Only a mill wheel master can set this up. Could it be that Tiger Cliff Castle has a mill wheel master?" Da Fei wanted to say something, but didn't dare to interrupt. When Yen said, "Speak," Da Fei said, "Tiger Cliff Castle can't have a mill wheel master. Our lead eagles and Tiger Cliff Castle have been in conflict for hundreds of years, but we have never seen a mill wheel master in Tiger Cliff Castle." Hong Chun stared angrily at the top of the cliff. If the sneak attack didn't work, then he would have to attack by force. This kind of terrain was too difficult. Suddenly, a sharp whistle sounded from the top of the cliff. It was the sound of an alarm. Chia's face was ugly. He could understand this kind of whistle. Everyone was gathered, and with the terrain advantage, a normal person could display the strength of 1,000 Luan master. If a rock were to fall on the bare cliff, other than a true expert, who could block it? Very quickly, there were already people on the top of the cliff. "Song, you brought a large group of people up." He asked, "Why did you blow the whistle?" The people guarding the fort were Hussein and Kudao. Hussein said, "Uncle, someone tried to climb up but fell down." Songyu looked down and could vaguely see a figure in the forest. He said, "Who was it?" Kudao said, "I don't know. This person should be very strong." "He fell down. We saw someone create a strange wind." That person didn't fall to his death, but climbed up and entered the forest. Songyu's face changed. He said, "Lead Eagles people or by Clan's people?" Only these two places knew about Tiger Cliff Castle's background. They could still provoke Lead Eagles, but they definitely couldn't provoke the 100 Clan village. Hussein said, "I don't know." Songyu quickly decided. He said, "Prepare the rocks. Mobilize everyone to bring the rocks and logs up. Also, boil water These were all prepared by Tiger Cliff Castle. It was a strategy arranged by their predecessors. Immediately, the top of the cliff became lively. The entire Tiger Cliff Castle mobilized. Those under 5 and above 60 didn't need to go to the top of the cliff. Everyone else went. The 5, 6, 7, 8 years old children only had one task, which was to make a fire and boil water. The ground was covered in ice and snow, so there was no need to find a water source. Hong Chen thought for a while and said, "Dafei, go and shout. Tell the people of Tiger Cliff Castle to surrender." Dafei could only come out. He used his lunli and shouted, "People of Tiger Cliff Castle, listen up. I am Lead Eagles Dafei. Together with the experts of my clan, I want you to surrender immediately. Immediately put down the basket." He continued to shout. Very quickly, from the top of the cliff came a loud voice, "Scram!" Everyone roared the same word at the same time. Everyone's heart was dripping with joy. The people of the wilderness might be simple and honest, or they might not have seen much, but the only thing they didn't lack was courage. How could they surrender without a fight when someone came knocking on their door? Hong Chen's face was cold. He said, "You don't know how to appreciate kindness." Chapter 36. Yen said, "They can't understand Master's strength. If they don't understand, then there's nothing to be afraid of." Hong Chen's face was slightly better. This kind of small mountain stronghold, not knowing of his existence, was normal. If he hadn't heard that there was a single lightning attribute person here, he wouldn't have come. Whether it was destroying Tiger Cliff Castle or keeping it, it wasn't important to him. What he needed was Lei Xingfeng. Dafei came back and said, "Senior, they don't agree." Hong Chen said, "Get lost. Chia, lead the cleanup team and attack." Chia nodded. Actually, it's good to attack freely. Sneaking around is too depressing. He believed that with 2 mill wheel masters, a mill wheel master, and a team of 1,000 Luen masters, it would be easy to take down this small Tiger Cliff Castle. Hong Chen said, "I'll help you." He turned his head and said, "Bring me a few dozen spears." Immediately, someone gathered 60 to 70 spears from the hunters of Lead Eagles and placed them in front of Hong Chen. Everyone didn't understand, not knowing how he would help. Could it be that he would throw the spears at the people at the top of the cliff? This was too difficult. From the bottom of the cliff, looking at the top, the figure was not much bigger than an ant, and they could only see a small head. Hong Chen didn't explain. He picked up a spear and said, "Chia, which path did you choose?" Chia said, "Still the same path. The other places are harder to climb." Hong Chen nodded his head and suddenly threw the spear with his arm. The spear left his hand and let out a sharp whistling sound. Ding! The spear had already been nailed to the cliff. Following that, Hong Chen continuously threw the spear, and with a continuous ding-ding sound, a flight of stairs was formed. Chia clapped his hands and said, "Martial Uncle's methods are good." The people at the top of the cliff saw that this method was a bit scary. Song Yu said loudly, "There's nothing to be afraid of. When the big rocks fall, there's nothing left. Look at the position and pile up the rocks for me. Pile up more, higher." The more people there were, the more strength there was. Hunters were all very strong. They could easily carry a few hundred kilograms of stones and carry a few thousand kilograms of stones with 2 people. Soon, there were more than a dozen piles of stones on the top of the cliff. There were also logs with a diameter of 2 feet. There were even logs with a diameter of 1 meter. Flames were burning under the cauldrons, and the water was boiling. Chia shouted, "Follow me." He held a huge shield in one hand and climbed with an empty hand. Following the steel spear nailed to the cliff, the 10,000 Luen masters followed behind him. Hong Chen said, "You 2 go up too." Yu and Dafei didn't dare to disobey. Looking at each other, They gritted their teeth and followed. A total of 13 people climbed up the cliff. Sanyu said, "Everyone calm down and wait for my command. Don't move." The steel spears extended from the bottom of the cliff to 3/4 of the cliff. Hong Chen didn't have the ability to nail all the spears into the cliff. After all, the cliff was too high from the ground. It might be possible to shoot people, but it would be difficult to nail them into the cliff. With the help of the spears, Chia's climbing speed was extremely fast. Very quickly, he reached the place where he was at a disadvantage. There were 3 spears here, allowing him to effortlessly pass through this obstacle. Everyone followed closely behind. Through the shield, Chia could already see the figures on the cliff. He was overjoyed and knew that he was about to succeed. He shouted, "Follow me and prepare for battle." "Release." Sanyu was shocked and thought, how can they be so fast? He immediately gave the order to release the rocks. A few hunters pried open the crowbars under the pile of rocks. Immediately, countless rocks rolled down from the cliff. Chia shouted, his whole body flashing with light. The huge shield protected his body. Pung, 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 pung. It made Chia's whole body tremble. His strength was enough to block the impact of the rocks, but the spear under his feet wasn't as strong. With a kacha sound, the spear pierced into the cliff and split open. 1,000-pound rock smashed into the shield. In an instant, the huge force shook the spear out of the cliff. Chia cursed loudly. He had no choice but to use both hands to hold onto the cracks in the rock, and the shield in his hand could only be abandoned. At this moment, there was a hua hua sound from above. Boiling water poured down, and in an instant, there was a vast expanse of white. This little bit of hot water was no threat to Chia, but the white mist it emitted made him a little crazy. Immediately after, the 3rd wave of attacks arrived. Logs were dropped from the cliff, and this wave of attacks finally had some effect. Pitiful cries sounded. One by one, the 1,000 Luan masters were smashed down by the logs. Even Chia couldn't do it. He jumped up and down the cliff, desperately dodging. Finally, he gave up. He knew that he couldn't continue to be brave, and quickly ran down the cliff. Because there were still remnants of the spear, it was easy for him to find leverage. In a moment, he had already escaped to the bottom of the cliff. 2 people died from the fall, 4 were injured, and the rest were running fast. Hong Chen's face was as gloomy as water. He said, "Very good, very good. Since you dare to resist, then wait for my complete destruction. From now on, Tiger Cliff Castle will no longer exist." Chia came before Hong Chen and said, "Martial uncle, I can't go up." Hong Chen hesitated. If he were to personally attack, this cliff wouldn't be much. However, he couldn't do it. As a true master, attacking a normal person's residential area would be too damaging to his status. If the news were to spread, it would really affect his position in Hong Tong. If he were to continue attacking, what would he use to block the attacks from the top of the cliff? Actually, he understood that even 1,000 Luan master could easily kill all of the hunters in Tiger Cliff Castle. However, relying on a natural cliff, he was actually able to block so many of their experts. It even forced him to make a move. Lei Xingfeng and his granddaughter found a total of 2 snowstorms. However, the old man's recovery wasn't very ideal. He was always 1 step away. For some unknown reason, if he couldn't completely recover, then he wouldn't be able to continue advancing. Seeing that hope was right in front of him, but he couldn't grasp it, the old man couldn't help but get angry. Luckily, after a few decades of peace, he was already able to control his emotions. Lei Xingfeng saw the old man's anxiety. From the first time he saw the old man until now, this was the first time he saw the old man with such an expression. It was like a bomb that could explode at any time. He comforted him. "Ah, Yi, we are not in a hurry. To be able to recover to this extent is already very good. We have plenty of time." The old man nodded and said, "I know. It's not that I'm in a hurry. It's just that when I train to this extent, I will naturally become irritable. Hee hee, don't worry, I won't act out in front of you siblings." Lei Xingfeng was instantly speechless. Of course, he knew that the old man wouldn't act out in front of him. This was a tacit understanding formed after years of being together. He was just purely worried about the old man's condition. The old man said again, "Find the last snowstorm thunderstorm. If it still doesn't work, then we'll go back." Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "Okay. Actually, the best thunder and lightning is the thunderstorm rain in the warm season. Snowstorm thunderstorm rain is far from being good." The old man said, "Each has its own advantages. Thunder and lightning are also different. I only realized recently." He suddenly slapped his own head and said, "I'm a fucking idiot." Lei Xingyao bit her finger in shock and said, Yi, why did you hit yourself? Doesn't it hurt?" The old man said, "It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt." "Ha, I understand. I understand." Lei Xingfeng smiled bitterly and said, Yi, what do you understand?" The old man said, "As long as we find another snowstorm thunderstorm rain, I have confidence that I can fully recover my cultivation and even improve it." "Ha." Lei Xingyao said, Okay. When Yi recovers, we can find our parents." She only said it casually, but it made Lei Xingfeng and the old man silent. After a while, the old man forced a smile and said, "And when Grandpa recovers, I'll bring you to find your parents." Lei Xingyao asked curiously, "Where did Mom and Dad go?" To her, Mom and Dad were just symbols. She was purely curious and had almost no feelings. If she had to choose between her parents or Yi and her brother, she would choose the latter without hesitation. No matter if it was Lei Xingfeng or Lei Xingyao, they didn't know that their parents were chased away by the old man. Even the old man himself didn't know where his son and daughter-in-law went, so he revealed an awkward expression. The old man said, "When the time comes, we'll look for them. We should be able to find them." He said without sincerity. Lei Xingyao couldn't hear the perfunctory tone in his words, but Lei Xingfeng understood. However, he didn't care. In this life, when he opened his eyes, he saw his little sister and Yi. He didn't care about other people. If they were good to him, his little sister and Yi, he didn't mind being good to them. If they weren't good to him, he would turn around and leave, since he didn't have any feelings. About 2 days later, the three of them finally encountered another snowstorm thunderstorm. At the beginning of the cold season, there was more snowstorm thunderstorm, but when the weather turned completely cold, the snowstorm thunderstorm was nowhere to be seen. This was a small thunderstorm snowstorm, much worse than the previous 2 thunderstorm snowstorms. Almost only thunder could be heard, but no lightning could be seen. The clouds were very thick, and the snow was very heavy. Lei Xingfeng and Lei Xingyao habitually found a huge tree and hid in the tree hole to wait. This time, Lei Xingfeng didn't cultivate because his cultivation speed was too fast. Even the old man was shocked and told him to stabilize his cultivation speed and temporarily not cultivate because he had already advanced to Wanluan Shi. The old man had seen many things, but he had never seen a 16-year-old who had reached Wanluan Shi. According to Lei Xingfeng's cultivation speed, the old man believed that he wouldn't need to wait until he was 17 before he could advance to mill wheel master. He didn't have the confidence in his heart, and for a moment, he didn't know whether it was good or bad. Lei Xingfeng had always been very obedient. He knew that the old man was doing it for his own good. So he listened to the old man's advice and didn't cultivate in the thunderstorm snowstorm weather. The old man excitedly went to look for lightning. He had already found a solution, and now he just needed to see how effective it was. Chapter 37. Lei Xingfeng was dumbstruck as he watched his grandfather fly up, his whole body flashing with electric arcs as he left the ground bit by bit. At first, his speed was slow, but after a few seconds, his speed suddenly increased, like lightning piercing straight into the dark clouds. Lei Xian Yao was in the basket, her two small hands hugging Lei Xingfeng's neck. She also looked at the sky dumbfoundedly. She said, Yi flew. Lei Xingfeng swore that this was the first time he saw a person fly into the sky without using anything. It was simply unbelievable. He suddenly understood that maybe one day he would be able to fly like Yi. His face immediately showed an extremely excited expression. He smiled and said, "Yes, he flew." The old man directly rushed into the clouds. He was like a huge lightning rod. Countless bolts of lightning struck towards them. In an instant, Lei Xingfeng and Lei Xian Yao saw a huge flashing ball. Then the sound of thunder rumbled through the sky. Lei Xian Yao covered her ears. The sound of thunder made her hair stand on end, not to mention the little girl was scared. Even Lei Xingfeng's heart trembled along with the sound of thunder. It was a natural power. Any living being would have a fear of thunder. "Brother, let's go to the tree hole." Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "Okay, Yao Yao, don't be scared." Lei Xian Yao tightly hugged Lei Xingfeng's neck and said softly, "What is scary thunder?" Lei Xingfeng had already chosen a huge tree. The huge trees usually did not gather together. There were usually 10 ancient trees in one place. They did not disturb each other. They could be seen from afar. Very quickly, they arrived in front of the huge tree and quickly climbed up. Actually, he knew in his heart that in the thunderstorm weather, it was very dangerous to climb up a tree. Luckily, it was not a rainy day, but a snowy one. He found a small tree hole and placed the basket inside. The old man quickly flew through the clouds, absorbing countless bolts of lightning. Lei Xingfeng sat in front of the tree hole, looking up at the sky. A huge silver ball of light appeared and disappeared in the dark clouds. When the ball of light appeared, the ground was covered in silver. The snow on the ground and the ball of light in the sky contrasted with each other. The sky was instead covered in black. Streaks of lightning extended, quickly connecting with the ball of light. Gradually, the ball of light became bigger and bigger. The large patch of dark clouds were pushed away by the dazzling brilliance. Gradually, the ball of light expanded. This ball, at first looked like a blurry shadow. It was faintly discernible between the lightning and thunder. Lei Xingfeng looked up. He said, "What is this thing?" A small head, Lei Xingfeng ball, said, "Brother, what did you say?" Xian Feng pointed to the sky. "Look." Lei Xian Yao snuggled into Lei Xingfeng's embrace. She looked up and said in surprise, "Wow, so beautiful, what is it?" As she spoke, the ball of light that looked like a picture expanded again, following which countless bolts of lightning struck on it. The picture seemed to be storing electricity. As the lightning struck on it, it became brighter and brighter, and more dark clouds gathered, producing even more lightning, which continued to strike on the ball of light. Suddenly, an extremely thick bolt of lightning streaked across, instantly piercing the ball of light, following which was an earth-shattering roar. The sound of thunder was like a huge drum from the east to the west, rolling past. Lei Xian Yao suddenly shrunk her neck. She said in shock, "So scary. That lightning stayed on it." That thick bolt of lightning was actually fixed on the ball of light. It looked extremely shocking. The whole ball of light was shining brightly. Countless small bolts of lightning were also fixed on the ball of light. After about 10 minutes, the whole ball of light was filled with traces of lightning. Lei Xingfeng opened his eyes wide. He had already somewhat reacted. The lightning image on the ball of light was very similar to the Leiyin he had before. He was suspicious. Could it be that Yi was condensing Leiyin? The old man was excited. he quickly condensed his own Lei-yin in the dark clouds. It must be known that before he was injured, he had condensed Lei-yin once. That time it took him more than 30 years to condense it, relying on his own Lei-yin power, bit by bit. But this time it was completely different. In less than 20 minutes, he had already formed the embryonic form of Lei-yin, and under the countless bolts of lightning, it gradually took shape. Almost without thinking, the old man Thunderstorm already understood. The Lei-yin condensed this time, compared to the Lei-yin condensed with Lei-yin power last time. Who knows how many times stronger that kind of violent power, bit by bit sealed in Lei-yin? That kind of feeling was simply intoxicating. Lei Xian Yao said, "Brother, it moved. That thing moved." Lei Xingfeng said, "Good fellow. Amazing." The ball of light had already expanded to a radius of a few hundred meters, which meant that a ball of light had a diameter of a few hundred meters. The sky was bright, and this giant ball of light began to move. The whole sky moved. A large amount of lightning was produced again, and it quickly absorbed the lightning, fixing it in the ball of light. As countless bolts of lightning were produced and fixed in the ball of light, not only did the ball of light not expand, it shrank bit by bit from a diameter of 500 meters all the way to a diameter of 100 meters. At this time, Lei Xingfeng could already be sure that this was Yi condensing Lei-yin. This process from the beginning until now, the process was very clear. This gave him a very special experience. When he cultivated to the old man's level, once he condensed Lei-yin, he would have a certain amount of experience. The old man's heart was filled with joy. This time condensing Lei-yin was also his last resort. He didn't think that it would have such a great effect. And it was also many times better than condensing Lei-yin by himself, sealing natural lightning, and forming Lei-yin. He was incomparably looking forward to it. Lei-yin shrank from 100 meters to a mere 10 meters. The power it contained. Even the old man felt that it was terrifying. He tried his best to control it, bit by bit. He left the dark clouds, brought the not completely condensed Lei-yin, and slowly descended from the sky. Above his head was a 6-meter diameter Lei-yin. The old man gradually descended to less than 10 meters above the forest, hovering there. The Lei-yin above his head was still struck by lightning from time to time. The rumbling sound was shocking to the soul. The old man carefully condensed Lei-yin, the overflowing power of lightning. With a slight vibration, the trees below were turned into ashes. This made Lei Xingfeng, who was watching from afar, feel shocked. This is the true embodiment of the power of lightning. He didn't know how far away he was. Lei Xingfeng secretly thought, maybe this time, you will be able to completely recover. Lei Xian Yao pointed at Lei-yin in the distance and said in shock, "That is Yi down there?" Lei-yin was even more dazzling. The lightning continued to strike Lei-yin. It looked extremely strange. The old man below was calm. He had already completely controlled Lei-yin. As long as he succeeded in condensing it, his power would not only recover, but also increase by a lot. Lei Xingfeng said, "Yes, that is Yi." Lei Xian Yao said worriedly, "Will he be in danger?" Lei Xingfeng laughed. "No, Yi is very powerful. He won't be in any danger." The old man's body was filled with Lei-yin's power. Yinli was an extremely high power, more powerful than Lunli and Luan-yinli. And once Lei-yin was condensed, it could become the source of Lei-yin's power. During normal training, the extra Lei-yin's power could be sealed within. And once it came to battle, the Lei-yin could provide a great help. An expert with Lei-yin and an expert without Lei-yin, even if they were in the same realm, the person with Lei-yin would definitely win against the person without Lei-yin. But seals were extremely hard to condense. Anyone who reached this realm wanting to condense a seal of their own, for example, a fire element person wanting to condense a seal of fire, or a light element person wanting to condense a seal of light, both required a large amount of time to construct the structure of the seal, slowly filling it with their own power, and finally forming their own seal. This process was extremely difficult. Many people had experience of failure after a lot of hard work. Just when they were about to succeed, the seals suddenly collapsed. However, Seals had a special characteristic. Even if it collapsed, it could still be condensed again. Maybe one or two times would not succeed. But if one persevered, one would succeed at least once, as long as one persevered. Of course, for a seal, according to the normal condensing method, 10 years was the minimum, 20 years was not rare, and 30 years was less, but using 30 years to create a seal was usually used by people who were more confident. Condensing a seal in 30 years had the highest success rate, while 10 years had the lowest success rate. The old man once used 30 years to condense a layeen and successfully condensed a layeen on his first try. After he was injured, his layeen appeared, and in the end, it was taken advantage of by Lei Xingfeng. After he recovered from his injury, he could only condense a new layeen, which could be considered the second time. He condensed his own layeen. The new layeen used a new method, combined with his previous methods and experience. And in less than 2 hours, he almost succeeded in condensing a seal. Even the old man was pleasantly surprised. The layeen gradually shrank until it was about 1 meter, and the light gradually weakened, like a black hole with countless jumping lightning flashing inside. The dark clouds in the sky gradually dissipated, and in just a moment, the sky actually shone through, and the heavy snow also stopped. The sky seemed to have exhausted all its energy, and the violent snowstorm, lightning, and thunder all disappeared. Only the old man was still hovering in the sky, and no one knew what he was doing. Countless lightning arcs could be seen bursting out from his body, communicating back and forth with the lightning in Layeen. Lei Xingfeng stared at the old man, and Layeen. He knew that Yi had reached the crucial moment, and success or failure would depend on this moment. Xiao! Suddenly, the old man opened his mouth and sucked, and Layeen suddenly turned into a ball of silver light and entered the old man's mouth. Immediately after, the old man's body emitted light in all directions, and in an instant, the light disappeared. The old man let out a long whistle and flew in a circle in the sky, and then flew to the huge tree Lei Xingfeng was on, and lightly floated down. Lei Xian Yao released her hands and clapped. Yi, you're awesome. Lei Xingfeng stood up and put down Lei Xian Yao, who was in his arms, and smiled. Yi, have you completely recovered? Chapter 38. The old man laughed out loud. Good. Everything is F*** King good. Ha ha, I am a good man again. Ha ha. He was so excited that he was a little crazy. It was no wonder a person who had lost all hope suddenly got a new lease of life, and a better one than before. It was hard to stay calm. Lei Xingfeng laughed. Yi, are we leaving during the winter? I realized that the winter is not that great. The old man said, moving during the winter, you and I will be fine, but Yao Yao will not be able to take it. She is too young and too weak. She will not be able to withstand the winter's blizzard. Lei Xingfeng nodded. That's good. Let's go back to Tiger Cliff Castle first. The old man said, Okay, let's go back first. Xian Yao said happily, Okay, let's go home. In the past few days outside, although her brother took care of her, the little girl still felt that it was better to be home. The old man said, Pack up, let's go. Hong Chun looked impatiently at the cliff. Failure after failure finally made him lose his patience, and he started cursing. Not only were Yingyu and Dafei scolded, but even Chia was scolded as well. It had been almost 10 days, and they still hadn't broken into Tiger Cliff Castle. Although there were a few days during which there were large snowstorms, there were still 2 days where they had a chance. The entire cliff was covered in ice, which was caused by water from above, making the cliff slippery. Even if there were steel spears nailed to the cliff, they would not be of any use. Chia gritted his teeth. Master Du, if you don't do anything, we will not be able to go up. Hong Chen scolded. I do something? How can I do something? I am a master of the mill wheel. If word gets out, I do something to mortals, do I still have the face to meet people? Chia laughed bitterly. But if you don't do anything, this cliff, we will not be able to take it down. Master do. He was also extremely angry. Normally, even if he was beaten to death, he would not dare to speak to Hong Chun like this. This had nothing to do with courage. This was a matter of ability. They were unable to stand on the cliff, no matter how strong they were. They would not be able to threaten the people on the cliff. In the past 10 days of attacks, many people had died, and even he himself had been injured. This was not because the Tiger Cliff castle hunters on the cliff were powerful, but because the advantage of the cliff had been exploited to the extreme. Especially now that it was snowing, he was even more helpless. Hong Chun hesitated in his heart. If he were to take action for the sake of his face, he would definitely not leave anyone alive. With his identity as a true master, a true ring body expert, if he were to personally take action against a mortal, if this were to spread out, he would not be able to face anyone. He was not a wild practitioner who could act without restraint. How could Chia not know what Hong Chun was thinking? He said, "Martial uncle, you only need to occupy the stone castle. Leave the rest to us." Hong Chun was still a little hesitant. He was attracted by the lightning attribute single-wheel seal, and according to the customs of this world, at his level, unless it was a battle between experts, he would not take action, as his table manners were too ugly and would be laughed at by many. Chia smiled bitterly. Of course, he understood what Hong Chun was thinking. If he had reached Hong Chun's level, he would also not take action. But with the current situation, he had no other choice and said, "Martial uncle, it's getting colder and colder. We don't care, but those hunters won't be able to take it." Hong Chun raised his head and looked, finally making a decision. He was also extremely impatient, and said, "All right, I'll go and occupy the stone castle, Motherf *****, a group of idiots. So many people can't even climb up the cliff, and I have to personally take action." Chia and the others immediately became excited. A will true master with one true ring body personally taking action. There were not many people who could see it with their own eyes. Hong Chun fiercely pounced towards the cliff, 1 foot stepping on a steel spear, his body flying upwards like a large bird, one hand hitting the cliff, and with just a slight push, he rose 7 to 8 meters. The people on the cliff were watching below, and when they saw Hong Chun pounce towards the cliff, they were already prepared. Countless rocks and logs fell, and they quickly realized that something was wrong. This person was completely different from those who had tried to climb before. Not only was his speed extremely fast, but the falling rocks and logs were also useless against him. The bigger rocks were smashed into pieces by Hong Chun's palm. He could even borrow the strength of the falling rocks and logs to increase his speed. Song Yu's face immediately changed, and the hunters on the cliff were all shocked. This person was too abnormal. Song Yu shouted, "Pour water!" Large amounts of boiling water were poured down in an attempt to stop Hong Chun. The method that had worked every time was completely ineffective this time. When the boiling water fell down, it did not even touch Hong Chun's body, and this guy only needed to reach out and touch the cliff, and the hard rocks on the cliff would be smashed into pieces. He also used the momentum of his ascent, and in just 10 seconds, he had already reached the middle of the cliff. Da Fei exclaimed from the bottom of the cliff, "So powerful!" Yen proudly said, "Of course, my master has always been powerful, unlike trash like you." Da Fei was so angry that his face turned red, but he did not dare to offend this woman, so he lowered his head and cursed madly in his heart. In the time it took to say a few words, Hong Chun had already reached the top of the cliff. At this time, the hunters on the cliff were all crazy. If they let him come up, everyone would be finished. At this point, everyone knew that Lead Eagles had found a big backer. Under Song Yu's command, a few piles of rocks that had already been prepared, under the combined efforts of everyone, loudly smashed down, and tens of logs were also pushed down at the same time. The entire top of the cliff was like boiling water, all of them roaring. A cloud of dust rose up, and with a long howl from Hong Chun, the falling rocks seemed to hit an invisible barrier, sliding past both sides. Hong Chun kicked the cliff, and with a loud bang, he forcefully reached the top with a long howl. Just as he steadied himself, 7 to 8 spears pierced towards him. Hong Chun coldly laughed and roared, "Scram!" With a wave of his hand, the 7 to 8 hunters all flew out, each of them spitting out blood in midair. Everyone could clearly see that when Hong Chun waved his hand, he did not even touch the hunters' bodies, but the 7 to 8 hunters were sent flying by an invisible force. Everyone had the same thought. This person's strength was too high and was not something they could defend against. A few hunters roared and were about to go up and fight, but Song Yu's experience was better, and he immediately stopped them. Hong Chun lightly said, "Don't try to continue attacking. If you anger me, I believe you will regret it." As he spoke, he walked towards the stone castle, not putting the few hundred hunters in his eyes. A group of hunters, armed with spears and bows, faced Hong Chun. Hong Chun coldly laughed. "Make way. I promise if you dare to attack within 15 minutes, I will kill all of you." Song Yu immediately waved his hand to signal the hunters who were blocking the way to move aside. He wasn't stupid. The other party wasn't boasting. With his strength, they weren't even on the same level. Many hunters asked, "Chief, what should we do?" Hong Chun quickly arrived at the stone castle, and he threw out the 2 hunters guarding the stone castle, and the hanging basket was immediately lowered. Song Yu's face was pale, and he said, "What else can we do? Our strength is not enough." Hong Chun said, "A few people come over." Song Yu was forced to call a few people to enter the stone castle, and Hong Chun said, "Send the people below up." In a moment, Chia, Yen, Ingyu, De Fei, and 2,000 Luan masters rode the hanging basket to the top of the cliff. Once Ingyu came up, he jumped down from the hanging basket and without hesitation pounced on the group of hunters. With a bang, 5 or 6 hunters were sent flying, and with a flurry of punches and kicks, the hunters fell to the ground. This guy hated the people of Tiger Cliff Castle and was ready to kill them. Hong Chun shouted, "Stop!" Only then did Ingyu bitterly stop, and he fiercely stared at the crowd, saying, "Woo! What?" No one could understand what he was saying, but everyone could hear the thick, killing intent in his voice. Song Yu's heart was ice cold. "Lead Eagle's people. This time it's over. You lead Eagle's people. What do you want?" De Fei said, "What do you want? What do you think will happen?" "Haha, idiot question." Hong Chun said, "De Fei, scram." De Fei was stunned. He did not dare to argue with Hong Chun and walked to the side. Hong Chun let out a smile and said, "Which one of you is in charge?" Song Yu stepped forward and said, "I am the chief of Tiger Cliff Castle. I am in charge here." He bit the bullet and said, Hong Chun nodded and said, "I don't want to make things difficult for you. As long as you hand over one person, we will turn around and leave. Don't worry. I will instruct the people of Lead Eagle to not be hostile to you." Ingyu was anxious. He wanted to shout, but only the sound of wind leaking out could be heard, and he was slapped by Chia. At this time, he dared to oppose Hong Chun. "Even if you don't want your life, I will." Hong Chun only coldly glanced at Ingyu, and Ingyu only felt his whole body turn cold, and sweat appeared on his forehead. Song Yu said, "Hand over who?" Hong Chun said indifferently, "A young man called Lei Xingfeng." Song Yu said firmly, "Sorry, our Tiger Cliff Castle does not have such a person." Not to mention that he could not hand over the person. Even if he could, he would not. Hong Chun's face immediately turned cold and said, "There is no such person?" Song Yu said, "Yes, there is no such person. I don't know who Sir heard this from." "Sir, we and Lead Eagle have been enemies for generations. It should be the people of Lead Eagle who made up this lie to deceive Sir. The old clan leader was extremely vicious. He knew that this time he would not be able to escape his fate, so he decided to frame the people of Lead Eagles before he died. Without waiting for Hong Chen to speak, Da Fei angrily jumped out, roaring, "You are lying! You are talking nonsense. Lei Xingfeng is your main hunter. How can there not be such a person?" Song Yu turned around and said, "Everyone, tell this, sir. Do we have Lei Xingfeng here?" All the hunters said in unison, "Sir, there is no such person." Someone added, "Our Tiger Cliff Castle only has the surnames Hu and Ku. Everyone knows. Where did a Lei come from?" Ku Dashan said calmly, "Sir, our Tiger Cliff Castle is only so big. Everyone is here. If you want to enter or leave, you can only enter this castle. If you don't believe me, you can search and see if there is a Lei Xingfeng person." Chapter 39. Ku Dashan's words caused Ingyu and Da Fei to panic. Da Fei screamed crazily, "You're lying! I'll kill you!" If the other side denied that there was Lei Xingfeng and they could not find him in Tiger Cliff Castle, then it was no longer a problem of trouble but a matter of life and death. If Hong Chen was angered, not only would Ingyu die, but he would also die. Even Ingyu's master would be in trouble. Ingyu's cheeks were leaking air, and he could not speak clearly. He was flustered and exasperated. He suddenly pounced, and a palm struck towards Song Yu. He wanted to kill the chief, to vent the anger in his heart. How could Song Yu block? He closed his eyes and waited for death. Who knew that he would hear a pung sound? He opened his eyes and was shocked to see that Ingyu had been kicked away by Hong Chen and was spitting out large mouthfuls of blood. Chia was furious, but with his martial uncle personally making a move, he did not dare to say a word. He secretly clenched his fists. Hong Chen turned his head and stared at him, lightly saying, "Your disciple, take care of him." Chia immediately broke out in cold sweat. He knew that Ingyu had offended Hong Chen. His heart was helpless, but his strength was not enough, and he could only endure. Hong Chen was not protecting Song Yu, but he knew that Song Yu was the chief of Tiger Cliff Castle. There were many things that he needed to do, and he could not die now. He said, "Gather everyone in Tiger Cliff Castle." Song Yu knew that he could not resist, so he agreed very quickly. After all, Lei Xingfeng's family of 3 had already left Tiger Cliff Castle, and it was impossible to find Lei Xingfeng here. He said, "Yes, I'll gather everyone immediately." This was an order that could not be refused. Song Yu hated the people of Lead Eagles, but he knew that it would not be wise to resist now. Very quickly, everyone arrived at Tiger Cliff Castle's platform. It was a huge stone platform, a few thousand square meters. It was used by Tiger Cliff Castle to dry and harvest their food during the winter. Now, it was covered with a few feet of snow. Thousands of people gathered in the snow. Song Yu said, "Everyone from Tiger Cliff is here." Hong Chen waved his hand, and the hunters from Lead Eagles immediately rushed towards the house to search. They wanted to see if anyone was hiding, especially one youth. He didn't believe that everyone had come out. Actually, he didn't know that Song Yu had indeed called everyone out. After a few hours of searching, a hunter from Lead Eagles came to report that all the rooms were empty. They also searched the other places, but found no one. The people of Tiger Cliff Castle were in an uproar. That was because the hunters of Lead Eagles all had quite a few things in their hands, openly robbing. This time, Hong Chen did not say anything. Although the hunters of Lead Eagles did not put in much effort, but their custom was that the winner had the right to take the prey of the loser. Song Yu also suppressed everyone's anger. This was not the time to fight. This was the time to save their lives. What he needed to do was to be calm and rational when dealing with the opponent. When everyone gathered, They were instructed by the hunters not to say that there were people from the Lay family in Tiger Cliff Castle. The people of this era were not only simple, but also extremely loyal and brave. Their belief in teamwork was incomparably firm. This was determined by life. In the mountains, if one could not stick together, it would be too difficult to survive. Sangyu said, "Everyone from Tiger Cliff Castle is here. Whether or not the person you're looking for is here, you'll know with one look." He tried his best to calm his emotions. His wrinkled face was extremely calm. Hong Chun stared at Yu and Defei and said, "You reported it. Go find him." The two suddenly understood that Lei Xingfeng was definitely not in Tiger Cliff Castle. Otherwise, the opponent would not be so calm. Immediately, the two of them panicked. Lying to Hong Chen, that was purely looking for death. But if they could not find Lei Xingfeng, then it would be really bad. Who knew what the furious Hong Chen would do? The dignity of the mill wheels master was definitely not to be challenged, let alone played with. If they could not find Lei Xingfeng, and Tiger Cliff Castle's people firmly denied the existence of this person, then Yu and Defei could borrow Hong Chen's power to take revenge on Tiger Cliff Castle. The worst part was that in the attack on Tiger Cliff Castle, the cleanup team lost a few thousand Luen masters. This was a serious problem. Yu and Defei's faces were pale. The two of them began to search for Lei Xingfeng. After a full hour, there was no sign of Lei Xingfeng. Defei braced himself and reported, "Lei Xingfeng, he is not here." Hong Chen's eyes flashed with anger. He suppressed his anger and said, "You come here." Sangyu stepped forward and said, "We originally did not have this person." Defei said, "That person must have left. Or, you guys hit him. You should have purposely let him leave to avoid us." The more he spoke, the more confused he became. Sangyu laughed coldly. "You Lead Eagles people are really despicable. We did not know that you came back, and did not know who you were looking for. How could we hide? If there really was such a person, Winter, where did you let him go? What a joke. You only used the excuse that we have the person you want here to attack Tiger Cliff Castle." The old patriarch's sharp tongue made Defei speechless. Defei's heart was sullen, and Yu's eyes were red. The people of Tiger Cliff Castle were too despicable. But why was Lei Xingfeng not here? The two of them wished they could go on a killing spree and completely destroy Tiger Cliff Castle. This time, even Chia felt that Sangyu's words were reasonable. He said, "Yu, Defei, is there such a person? Tell us the truth." Hong Chun was personally invited by Chia. The reason was that Tiger Cliff Castle had a single lightning attribute youth. But this youth was missing, and Tiger Cliff Castle refused to admit that there was such a person. Was there anything worse than this? Chia had the urge to strangle the two of them to death. They were simply cheating their master. Yu and Defei started to tremble uncontrollably. Yu couldn't speak clearly, so he could only let Defei speak. He trembled and said, "There really is such a person? How would I dare to talk nonsense? You. His anger exploded at Sangyu. He rushed forward and grabbed Sangyu's neck, shouting, You hand him over. You hand over that little guy." Sangyu found it hard to breathe. He struggled with all his might. A few hunters came forward to stop him, but they were all kicked away. He shouted, "Where is he? Hand him over. I will slaughter your Tiger Cliff Castle." Suddenly, the people of Tiger Cliff Castle were in chaos. The crowd surged, and the hunters of Lead Eagles pointed their weapons at them. They could start a massacre at any time. Hong Chen's face was gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. Actually, he was half believing and half doubting. He did not believe that Chia would lie to him. The consequences were not something a normal person could bear. but the people of Tiger Cliff Castle in front of him refused to admit the existence of this person. What was the problem? He was confused for a moment. Enough! Hong Chen finally spoke, and Dafei bitterly loosened his grip. Sangyu hugged his neck, breathing heavily. Dafei's strength was great, almost taking his life. A few hunters rushed forward and helped Sangyu up. Hong Chen said coldly, "I'll give you a chance if you have Xian Feng here. Then I'll let your Tiger Cliff Castle go. If not, don't even think about living." It was a blatant threat. Sangyu's heart skipped a beat, but he immediately understood that Hong Chen was trying to trick him. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a sharp whistle from afar. It was to inform the people of Tiger Cliff Castle that someone had returned. It was the whistle that signaled the people of Tiger Cliff Castle that someone had returned. Ku Dashin and the others' faces all changed. Sangyu was the same. The person who returned at this time could not be anyone else. It must be Lei Xingfeng. This simple whistle sound was also understood by the people of Lead Eagles. Ku Dashin took out the whistle and was about to blow it. Ying Yu, who had been staring at them for a long time, immediately rushed forward and threw a punch, knocking the whistle away. Dafei's reaction was not slow either. He shouted, "Whoever dares to inform, I'll kill him." Dafei immediately ran in front of Hong Chen and said, "Whistle, that means someone has returned. It could be the person we're looking for." Hong Chen instantly smiled and said, "Very good, bring him up." Immediately, someone dashed over. Sangyu sighed. He had no way to stop it. The difference in strength was too big. Ku Nanshan was about to move when he was pulled back by Sangyu, who slowly shook his head. After a moment, an old man, a young man, and a little girl walked over. Lei Xingfeng looked at the people of Tiger Cliff Castle, who were surrounded, as well as the hunters of Lead Eagles, who were eyeing them covetously. He sensed that the other 10 people were all experts, especially the old man who gave him an unfathomable feeling. He looked back at Yi, only to see Yi nodding slightly, indicating that Lei Xingfeng should not be afraid. Dafei was overjoyed. He ran to Hong Chen's side and whispered, "That young man is the person we're looking for. His name is Lei Xingfeng." Immediately, Hong Chen smiled. This trip was not in vain. He was almost fooled by the people of Tiger Cliff Castle. Yen dared to swear that even her master had never spoken to her in such a gentle tone. Hong Chen's face was full of smiles. Lei Xingfeng suddenly felt that this guy was a fox who wanted to steal chicken. You're tuning into the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.